Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to become free, the more tightly you seem to bind yourself to the trying? It is one of the strangest jokes the mind plays on itself. You declare with great sincerity that you will be liberated, that now at last you will live without fear, without inner chains, without the old habits of clinging and control, and almost immediately you strap yourself to a method, a timetable, a discipline, a private exam whose passing is meant to certify your arrival into peace. Freedom becomes another project, another future, another improved identity, waiting just beyond the next successful effort. Yet if you watch closely, you may notice something deeply paradoxical. The knot often loosens not when you pull harder, but when the pulling stops. Sleep arrives when you stop courting it. Laughter returns when you stop demanding happiness. A forgotten name rises when the desperate search relaxes for a moment. And in exactly the same way, freedom begins to reveal itself when the feverish hunt for freedom grows tired enough to sit down. This is the paradox at the center of the whole matter. We were trained to hunt freedom as though it were hiding in tomorrow, as though it were a condition to be earned through refinement, discipline, insight, spiritual achievement, psychological mastery, or some cleaner and wiser version of ourselves. But freedom is not waiting on the far side of the hunt. Freedom is the clearing in which the hunt appears. It is not the final prize handed to the diligent seeker. It is the quiet space before the seeker began chasing at all. Not an object, but an openness. Not an achievement, but the pause in which achievements briefly lose their glamour. We treat life ordinarily as if it were a machine, and ourselves as the anxious operators assigned to keep it from malfunctioning. We set quotas for peace, deadlines for healing, standards for love, and performance indicators for the soul. We imagine a little cockpit called me filled with levers labeled should, must, improve, manage, prevent, secure. We grip those levers with all the seriousness of a pilot descending through dangerous weather. Yet the harder we grip, the less trustworthy the world begins to feel. The more tightly we demand certainty, the more brittle the whole enterprise becomes. The more we insist that safety be guaranteed, the more life begins to resemble rumor. It is as though we are standing at the shore trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon, forgetting that the sea rises and falls without our supervision and has never once asked to be governed by our private panic. But what if life already knows how to be life? What if breath, heartbeat, dawn, grief, change, love, endings, seasons, all these vast and intimate movements, are wiser than our compulsive choreography? Fear says without control everything collapses. But perhaps the quieter truth is that without compulsive control everything finds its rhythm again. To even glimpse this, however, we must begin looking at the itch underneath the project. We must look at the illusion of a separate controller, the little inward manager who imagines himself standing apart from the dance, issuing instructions to reality, rather than discovering that he is the dance so close to the music he mistakes himself for the conductor. This misunderstanding creates the entire drama. You can feel it physically, in the jaw, where effort becomes clench, in the shoulders, which rise as if guarding the heart from weather, in the calendar, which begins colonizing the present with the demands of tomorrow, in the breath, which no longer breathes but gets supervised. And so a quiet question appears. Has effort replaced intimacy? Has management replaced participation? Has the project of becoming free quietly become another form of bondage? The first thing to see is this. Control, in its rigid form, is the root of much anxiety. Not guidance, not skill, not ordinary practical responsiveness, but the hard insistence that reality obey command. Try to hold the breath, and the breath trembles. Try to control the heart, and it races. Try to lock down the future, and it frays in the hand like rope in a storm. Water teaches this perfectly. A clenched fist cannot receive it. At best it crushes emptiness. A relaxed palm can cradle a little lake. Sleep teaches it too. You cannot force the crossing. You dim the room, set down the day, soften the body, and step aside. The more you clutch at sleep, the less it trusts your company. The same is true of inner freedom. It is not seized. It appears when seizing subsides. And why do we cling so hard? Because the mind has learned to confuse vigilance with love, surveillance with care, tension with responsibility. It says, if I stop monitoring, everything will fall apart. If I stop bracing, I will be broken. If I stop seeking, I will sink. Yet the body knows something gentler and far older. It knows how the breath settles the moment it is trusted. It knows how the shoulders fall when no one is trying to hold up the sky. It knows that discipline becomes much more intelligent when it shifts from demand to devotion, from battle to play, from inspection to affection. So perhaps the reversal begins there. Attention not as policing, but as tenderness. Practice not as conquest, but as companionship. Improvement not as punishment, but as the byproduct of love. What happens when meditation is no longer an exam? What happens when breathing is no longer tracked for progress? What happens when the inner manager lays down the clipboard and the musician begins listening for the timing that was already there before any plan was made? Another insight follows naturally. We tend to imagine freedom as more choice, more levers, more room to manipulate outcomes. But deeper freedom begins when choice itself stops being a battlefield. When the chooser softens, choosing becomes flow. The ego imagines it must accumulate power in order to earn liberty. But liberty appears when the compulsive chooser begins to dissolve. This is not passivity. A wave is not passive. It is the ocean in motion. But when the wave forgets that it is ocean, it thrashes at the surface as if survival depended on private effort. When it remembers, movement becomes play. The shape still rises and falls, but the panic loses its throne. And how many times has life already carried you in precisely this way? How often did clarity arrive only after you stopped forcing it? How many times did the answer come during the walk, the shower, the pause after tears, the quiet moment at the sink, the breath after giving up on solving everything? Understanding is rarely theatrical. It is intimate. It sounds like the hush after an exhale. So perhaps the question is not how do I become free, but who is it that is trying so hard to be free? What is this project really defending? And what happens when the projector is seen to be made of the same light as the film? Even the wish to awaken can become another strain, another private ambition dressed in sacred clothing. Yet simple attention loosens what heroic striving tightens. The knot relaxes. The room reveals itself. And the room, perhaps to our great astonishment, was already the place we were standing in. Bring this down from philosophy to the kitchen table, to the cushion, to the page, to the body. Notice how quickly even beautiful practices become contests in the hands of the anxious self. You sit to watch the breath and begin rating the sitting. Am I calmer yet? Is this working? Have I improved? When will peace begin? Under this inspection, the breath becomes awkward. You begin bargaining with your feelings. Sadness may stay for 5 minutes, but not 6. Thoughts may pass, but only if they are noble. Even silence gets audited, and so peace is postponed yet again. The present is allowed to exist only on parole. But when the inspection lamp is set down, something almost embarrassingly simple occurs. The breath breathes itself. Tea tastes like tea. The chair remembers being a chair. The window goes back to framing weather without complaint. Nothing supernatural in the faraway sense, only the miracle of nearness, finally admitted. Peace appears not because you won meditation, but because the activity of winning got tired and took a nap. The mind protests, of course. No measuring, no improvement, no heroic path. But perhaps there is another orientation available. Practice as play, attention as affection, discipline as devotion. Then growth arrives sideways, like laughter surprising a solemn room, and a quieter question begins to form, shaped like a door you have been pushing against for years. If you stop seeking peace as a goal, does peace vanish, or does it finally find the entrance that was never closed? Maybe peace is shy. Maybe it enters only when the house is no longer being inspected. Maybe it slips in like a stray cat through the kitchen when the room is quiet, when no one is grading the silence or auditing the moonlight on the sink. Leave a light for it. The The mind will insist it knows better. That is its habit. If I stop seeking, I will sink. If I loosen my grip, the world will come apart. If I trust the dance, the floor will vanish. Fear is ancient, and we should be gentle with it. It grew from love that hardened into patrol. Protection became control. Care became management. The inner guard took up its rounds and forgot that many of the locks it checks were never there. So begin with small experiments. In conversation, say, "I do not know," and watch how the sky fails to collapse. Feel the urge to fix the moment and let the urge pass like weather. Notice the pressure to force an outcome and instead give the plan some air. The ego stamps its foot and calls this reckless, but the river reaches the sea without memos, and the breath returns without permission slips. Humility begins to sound less like defeat and more like rain on a tin roof, ordinary, relieving, entirely sufficient. You stop pretending to be meteorologist of the absolute and remember that you belong with the sky. The mind may concede small things but still insist on its authority in love, in grief, in change, in the places where the heart is most tender. Good. Let us go there too. Because it is precisely there that the logic of control frays most visibly. What happens when you stop managing love and let love behave like love, moving around obstacles the way water moves around stone, carrying leaves, polishing cliffs, refusing to be improved by supervision? What happens when grief is allowed to weather instead of being filed into stages and timed like a government process? What happens when change is not rehearsed against, but listened to? You may find that outcomes still unfold, the world still turns, but the ache of pushing begins to fade, and in that soft absence of pressure, something unexpected arrives. Courage. Not announced, not decorated, just there. Perhaps love breathes best with the windows open. Perhaps grief walks more truly when no one supervises its steps. Perhaps change sits quietly once we stop demanding explanations from tomorrow. Perhaps the qualities we chase, peace, love, clarity, freedom, are shy creatures after all. They prefer quiet rooms. If that is so, then the controller is not our savior, but the one making too much noise for them to enter. And so, a final question for this beginning. If life is already this intimate, if breath and tide and tea and silence and sorrow are already speaking in the simplest possible language, where exactly is the controller hiding? Perhaps nowhere, except in the habit of looking away from what is already here. And perhaps freedom, which seemed so far, is waiting very close by, in the exact place where the search itself is willing to rest. Love is the place where the project of control becomes most desperate and most absurd. We try to secure love, define it, guarantee it, perform the version of ourselves we believe will be most safely received, and then wonder why love cannot quite reach us. It is not that life withholds intimacy. It is that intimacy cannot find us through the costume. We dress in competence, in charm, in usefulness, in insight, in spiritual fluency, in patience, polished to the point of self-erasure. We become very good at being who we think can be loved, and in proportion to that skill, we become harder to find. Love does not fail because the world is empty. Love falters because so much of what we offer to it is management rather than meeting. Sit with someone you care for and listen without repairing, without silently composing the wiser answer, without arranging your face into the proper expression of concern. Simply listen as if the ocean were speaking through that particular wave. Something astonishing happens in such unguarded attention. Love enters barefoot, almost shyly, carrying sand into the room you had spent years trying to keep polished. And instead of being annoyed, you are grateful. The room begins to feel inhabited rather than maintained. The same is true of grief. Administer grief like a bureaucracy, and it becomes paperwork for the heart. You track stages, make schedules, demand progress, ask when the feeling will be complete, audit your tears for efficiency, convert sorrow into a project. But grief is not an office. It is weather. Let it rain, and something more honest than management begins to happen. Tears come like rain, yes, but gratitude may appear beside ache, and laughter may flash through the cloud cover with the same strange legitimacy as sorrow. The storm is not solved, it is met. That is all. Yet that all changes everything. Change itself, that perennial theater of the anxious mind, reveals the same pattern. We keep demanding guarantees from tomorrow as though the future were a reluctant employee who might sign if pressured properly. Every promise wrestled from tomorrow is paid for with absence today. Make plans, certainly. Plans are beautiful and practical, like maps folded in a pocket, but hold them the way a dancer holds a partner. Firmly, lightly, ready to turn with the music, a small dawn begins to break here. The qualities we most chase, peace, love, clarity, even courage, tend to arrive only when we stop ordering them to appear. They are shy, they enter quiet rooms, they do not usually come where they are being inspected, and so another simple question returns. If you stop seeking peace as an outcome, does peace vanish, or does it finally find the entrance that was never closed? You begin to notice how affection deepens when you stop auditioning, how grief becomes song rather than choking when you stop timing the tears, how decision becomes simpler when you listen for rhythm rather than demand certainty. These are not miracles imported from elsewhere. They are recognitions admitted at last. Truly, the paradox can now be named without disguise. You will never control life until you stop trying to control it. This is not a trick. It is rhythm. Grip the drumsticks too hard and the beat goes stiff. Loosen the grip and the groove arrives of its own intelligence. The control you wanted returns in another form entirely. Not domination, but responsiveness. Not command, but feel. A surfer does not master the wave by bullying it. She reads it, joins it, and in joining acquires a kind of uncanny influence. She carves the water not because she conquered the sea, but because she conspired with it. Mastery becomes participation. Bring this into the mind itself. A thought arises, I must be free, and immediately you feel the old temptation to wrestle it, improve it, replace it, correct it with a better thought. Instead, notice it the way the sky notices a cloud. In the noticing, space appears, and in space, another rhythm becomes audible. You realize you were never the storm. You were the room in which weather happened. Stopping the search does not mean abandoning practice. It means replacing the anxious project manager with a dancer. The outer forms may remain. You still sit. You still breathe. You still speak, listen, work, repair, rest. But the compulsion begins to dissolve, which leads to a stranger experiment than most manuals allow. Stop trying so hard to be yourself and let yourself happen. The river does not force the banks. The banks shape the river, and the river shapes the banks in return. This conversation is already underway before your self-improvement program arrives to claim authorship. Speak from listening rather than performance, and watch how the words find their own weight. Walk as if the ground meets you halfway, and balance appears without being counted. Work as if the task were partner rather than hostage, and skill begins to ripen by itself. Here, control is not lost. It is transfigured into cooperation, a freedom that moves with events rather than against them. The paradox bows and smiles, inviting you closer. You are not a wave struggling against the ocean. You are the ocean pretending to be a wave for a while. The universe plays hide and seek by becoming particular. This hand, this lamp, this laugh, this worry, this evening, and then forgetting just enough to make remembering delicious. Relax your grip on identity and you do not become vague. You become more precise, but without tension, like a flame that knows how to burn without trying to become a monument. The separate self, defended, busy, comparing, planning, softens into a presence that can contain comparison without being trapped by it. The mirror remembers it was never the faces. This expansion is not far away in the sense of galaxies, though galaxies bow within it. It is intimate in the sense of breath. The tree outside the window is a gesture of the same life that looks from your eyes. The tide is a lung, your lung a tide. When the performer bows, the stage remains. That is the secret. Freedom is not an acquisition for the little self. It is the recognition that the little self was always a costume for the play. Enjoy the costume, respect it, care for it. But remember the actor. Costumes are persuasive, conviction sticks. And so a playful question arises. Why thrash like a drowning wave if the ocean is already here? Perhaps because the play is sweetest when the forgetting is nearly over. When the curtain is about to rise and the audience hushes, hearing the first bar of music, you begin to sense how vastness hides in the ordinary. A teacup warming the palm, a street dog asleep in a patch of sun, a child asking a question no book can answer, the same life bows in each scene, improvising, never repeating, yet somehow unmistakably familiar. As identity relaxes, kindness becomes less a rule and more an instinct. Creativity becomes obvious rather than heroic. Gratitude becomes weather rather than agenda. The rhythm slows. Night gathers. The refrigerator hums. Tires whisper on wet pavement. Your breath arrives and departs like a small tide. Feel the body as weather crossing a wider sky. Thoughts pass like birds across a winter moon. There is no need to chase them away, and no need to keep them either. A tenderness rises, not sentimentality, but clarity. Life has been carrying you all along, and your frantic paddling was charming at best. The shoulders drop, the jaw unhooks, the heart resumes its patient drumming. You start to notice what was always speaking beneath the noise. The silence holding sound, the stillness holding movement, the space holding every story without becoming imprisoned by any of them. You were measuring the present with a ruler made out of tomorrow. In the noticing, the ruler dissolves. This descent is not a fall. It is a landing. The floor does not vanish. It arrives quiet and wide. Home feels like home, not because the furniture changed, but because the frantic host finally left the party. Stay a moment longer. Let the breath be the wave, and the wave the breath. Let the room be the room without commentary. If you are already home, what remains to be sought except the simple pleasure of wandering freely in a house that was always yours? Morning and night you may hear the world giving the same quiet instruction. The radiator ticking like patient Morse code. The clock no longer a judge, but a bell calling you back to now. Water no longer a method, not medicine, not symbol, simply water. A smile appears for no reason the mind can file, and that is precisely the point. The heart understands reasons. The head cannot stamp, approve, or schedule. Gather the threads. Control breeds anxiety. Clenching cannot hold water. Sleep arrives only sideways. The manager softened into the dancer. The storm widened into sky. The ocean remembered itself beneath the wave. The mirror was never the faces. Silence carries sound. None of these are separate teachings. They are facets of one jewel. The seeker and the sought are made of the same light. You were hunting for the key while holding it as your own hand. Grasping turned the palm into a fist. Opening revealed the hand again. The project of becoming free fails, because freedom is not an object acquired by a seeker. It is what shines when the seeker rests. The controller is an optical illusion, like a whirlpool that looks like a thing but is only motion. See through it, and the river keeps rivering. We are near the marrow now. One more subtle shift remains. Are you willing to let the seeker dissolve into the seeing itself? To let the striving wave recognize the ocean not as philosophy, not as belief, but as simple fact? Nothing dramatic is required. Only a pause. A bow. A willingness to stop pretending you stand outside what you are. Then the horizon seems to come forward, and the room you were seeking turns out to be the room you had always been standing in, waiting as patiently as light. The mind may protest at this point because endings threaten its employment. It wants fireworks, a certificate, a final dramatic scene in which the seeker crosses a finish line and hangs a framed document on the wall that says free at last. But the most faithful revelations arrive like weather. A curtain lifts inside, the eyes soften, the breath discovers it was never late. You do not grab freedom. You notice it the way you notice warmth when the sun steps from behind a cloud. And in that noticing, something stops shivering. Let the theme widen into the whole theater of your life. You had assumed freedom would arrive with cleaner circumstances, tidier thoughts, a more obedient body, a better schedule, a more enlightened personality. Instead, it begins when the sense of a separate controller relaxes into presence. Practice turns inside out. You are no longer squeezing results from life as though life were reluctant to cooperate. You are listening to life phrasing itself through you. That listening has texture, patience in traffic, warmth in disagreement, curiosity when the body complains, a little more humor when plans wobble. The smallest rituals grow strangely radiant. Tying shoes, rinsing bowls, opening curtains, writing one true line in an email. They no longer look like errands performed by a burdened self in order to secure worth. They begin to feel like simple gestures inside a reality already willing to hold them. You notice that mistakes still happen, of course. The coffee spills, the meeting goes badly, the wrong thing is said, the body tires, someone misunderstands you, the mood turns. Yet catastrophe rarely justifies the hours spent rehearsing it. You notice that people remain mysterious, and that love persists anyway, not because you convinced it to, but because you set a table and stopped lecturing the guests. You notice that creativity rises the moment performance steps aside and falls, the instant the audition resumes. Nothing was missing but attention. Once attention returns, even sorrow finds a chair and no longer needs to shout in order to be heard. You are no longer the prosecutor of experience. You become its host, passing bread, and like any good host, you discover that generosity arranges a room better than anxiety ever could. Conversations loosen. Laughter comes back like birds returning at dawn. The quiet guest speaks. Freedom feels less like victory and more like a well-tuned instrument, responsive, alive, available to touch. You begin to see that presence is practical. It fixes fewer things and heals more. It speeds nothing and yet somehow saves time. It makes room for others to be themselves, which strangely encourages you to be yourself without effort. All this points toward a simple readiness. A door is already ajar. The question is whether you will walk through without demanding a parade, or whether you will remain waiting for trumpets that never arrive. So walk gently and return once more to the paradox itself. You cannot grasp freedom without turning it into another possession. Yet you can live it by relaxing the grip that tries to grasp. The practice is disarmingly ordinary. Notice the tightening. Breathe, soften, respond, repeat as needed. In time, the intervals shorten. In time, the reflex learns another rhythm. You begin to trust that silence is not the enemy of action, but the well from which action draws clean water. You begin to trust that not knowing is not a defect, but a doorway. You begin to trust that the heart has reasons the analyst cannot chart, and rhythms the manager cannot schedule. From this trust comes a peculiar courage, not the swaggering courage that announces itself, but the quiet courage to let things mean what they mean without rushing in with verdicts. And then the horizon seems to lift. The old project manager looks up from the forms and realizes the meeting has ended. The guests have gone outside to dance in the rain. He smiles despite himself, steps into the weather, and remembers the steps. Perhaps he always knew them, perhaps he always did. The music is not loud, yet it carries. Feet find a pattern older than thought. Arms rise when needed and fall when the verse ends. No one owns the dance. Everyone belongs to it. You feel the same recognition at the sink, at the threshold of sleep, in the ordinary choreography of living. These things begin to glow, not because you won a prize, but because winning stepped aside. You stop asking for proof and start noticing evidence. Kindness met with ease, patience answered by clarity, humor returning like birds at first light. Nothing grand, only simple moments stitched together by attention into a garment called now. Try it again. Notice the tightening. Breathe, soften, respond. Repeat until repetition becomes rhythm and rhythm becomes a way. Let it keep time for you. Here is the revelation. Simple as breath. It was never missing. It was never gone. It was only forgotten. Picture a mirror fogged by impatient breathing. You polished one corner with heroic fervor, convinced that clarity required struggle. But the nature of the mirror was always to reflect. When the effort stops obscuring it, the fog clears. Face and sky appear together. The mirror did not become reflective. You stopped covering it. Or think of a river. You stood in it, scooping water again and again, trying to keep forever what can only be felt in flow. The water kept slipping through your hand, and you called that failure. Then one day the hand opened and the current held you. Seeking presumes absence. Absence was the assumption. End the assumption, and distance falls away like a dream waking into itself. Listen closely. The freedom you chase is the spaciousness in which the chase appears. The seeker relaxes. The horizon steps forward. The project concludes by dissolving, like salt returning to sea. The door you tried to break down opens when you stop pushing. The lock was your posture. The key is your softening. There is no finish line at the world's edge. Only world and sky dissolving into each other in one unguarded glance. Everything ordinary brightens, not because it changed, but because you stopped demanding that it change before you would allow yourself to be here. Bring it all the way home now. Morning returns with its familiar tug, plans, obligations, ambitions, unresolved things. You notice the tug and breathe, not to fix the day, but to remember the ocean in which the day will move. Coffee steams, a quiet banner that reads here. You answer an email with one breath of pause, and let the response ripen by that single measure. You walk, and the pavement agrees to be earth. Seasons remain, bills arrive, storms visit. Hearts break, and then mend imperfectly. Yet you no longer chase life like a fugitive. You dance with it like a partner. The steps remain: work, rest, loss, affection, change, but the rhythm grows kinder, wider. It no longer insists on guarantees because it trusts music. Responsibility deepens not because you worry more, but because you belong more. You respond because this moment is already responding through you. You still keep appointments, but the calendar loosens its moral grip. You still speak truths, but the tongue softens. You still change course, but steering begins to feel like guiding a friend rather than wrestling an enemy. This is not withdrawal. It is intimacy. And strangely, kindness becomes practical, like a tool you carry ready for the next small moment that asks for it. Then continue. Freedom was never a destination. It is the way things move when you stop insisting they remain still. The wave bows back into the ocean, and the ocean becomes 1,000 waves. The mirror reflects face and sky, sorrow and laughter, without clinging to any of them. Breath enters and leaves, singing of a wholeness that cannot be captured because it was never broken into parts in the first place. If you must seek, then seek as a lover wanders through a beloved house already your own, not to acquire it, but to marvel, not to conquer, but to explore. Let the play reveal itself as play. Let the dream recognize itself as dream. Then even your questions become part of the answering music. You were never separate from the universe. You were the universe remembering itself in this shape for a little while. The game continues, yes, but now you play knowingly, sometimes bold, sometimes quiet, always listening for the rhythm that was waiting for you to stop conducting and start dancing. And when forgetting returns, because it will, receive it as weather, not as failure. Touch the breath, look into a mirror, walk beneath a tree and let the shade remind you. Smile at a street dog teaching effortless acceptance. Let silence tuck the world in when night comes. Rest, not in achievement, but in openness. Stay close to that, very close, because the one who was looking has never been other than the looking itself. And that looking, at rest in its own spaciousness, is already free. Let us stay with that closeness and take it one step further, because there is a subtle trap waiting even here. The mind, having heard that freedom appears, when grasping relaxes, immediately tries to weaponize relaxation. It says, "Ah yes, then I shall become excellent at letting go. I shall monitor my softness, measure my spaciousness, grade my surrender, and quietly turn even openness into a project of self-improvement." This is how cunning the seeker can be. It can make a task out of the end of tasks. It can turn the fragrance of freedom into another product on the shelf. So it helps to see clearly that the point is not to become someone who performs non-grasping beautifully. The point is to notice, again and again, the places where life is already flowing before your management arrives, to claim authorship. Think of the hand reaching for a glass. Most of the motion happens without a committee meeting. The fingers know. The muscles know. The body knows. But the mind, arriving a moment late, narrates it all as though it were executive decision. And then it feels burdened by a world it imagines it must constantly produce. You can watch this happen in speech. A sentence begins forming before you consciously choose each word. A laugh rises before you legislate it. A response comes alive in the body before the manager writes the memo explaining why it was wise. This does not mean you are helpless or passive. It means the deeper rhythms of living were never waiting for your permission. They were waiting only for your participation. That difference matters enormously. Participation is fluid. Management is tight. Participation listens. Management supervises. Participation leaves room for surprise. Management treats surprise like an insult. And so the search for freedom ends not in a dramatic renunciation of life, but in a subtler honesty about how much of life was never under the kind of control you imagined and never needed to be. There is relief in that honesty, though at first it may feel like vertigo. If I am not managing everything, then what am I doing? You are living, which is to say breathing, sensing, responding, making contact, resting, grieving, laughing, moving, noticing, and allowing the vast, ordinary intelligence of life to include your preferences without being ruled by them. This is why freedom often feels less like triumph and more like homecoming. Nothing new is acquired. Something unnecessary falls away. You stop measuring the present with a ruler made of future conditions. You stop asking each hour to prove its worth. You stop requiring every feeling to justify its arrival. Anger can be anger without becoming identity. Sadness can be sadness without becoming destiny. Joy can be joy without being photographed by the mind for later use. The room becomes large enough for all of it. And when the room is large enough, fear has less reason to shout. It still visits, yes. It may still knock the pictures crooked and pace the hallway. But it no longer fills the whole house. There are windows now. There is air. There is also a new relationship to effort. This matters because many people hear all this and secretly worry that what is being recommended is softness in the weak sense, collapse, vagueness, loss of edge. But the dancer does not lack discipline. The musician does not lack rigor. The surfer does not lack skill. What changes is not the presence of effort, but the atmosphere around it. Effort without strain is a very different animal from effort driven by self-surveillance. You can write with devotion instead of desperation. You can practice with affection instead of self-correction. You can work with precision without converting every task into a referendum on your worth. And paradoxically, that very relaxation often makes you more accurate, not less. The body performs better when it is not being threatened by its own overseer. The mind thinks more clearly when it is not being whipped into productivity. The heart loves more cleanly when it is not secretly bargaining for security. So perhaps one of the most liberating discoveries is that inner freedom does not cancel form, it restores it. The cup is still a cup. The calendar still has appointments. The body still has limits. The world still asks practical things of you. But all of that becomes lighter when it is no longer enlisted into the old war for self-certainty. Then even routine takes on a different texture. Sweeping the floor is not beneath enlightenment. It is enlightenment wearing socks. Answering an email with one clear sentence is not a distraction from the path. It is the path finding its own handwriting. Drinking water is not a break from the sacred. It is the sacred arriving in the shape of thirst and being met without drama. This is what the mind kept missing because it was so fascinated by distant fireworks. Freedom is embarrassingly near, near enough to be overlooked, near enough to be hidden by the very effort to attain it. And when this really lands, something in you starts to laugh, not mockingly, but with the relief of recognizing a game you no longer have to take so solemnly. The great search was happening inside the very openness it claimed to be seeking. The seeker was made of the same light as the sought. The project was a whirlpool, convincing while spinning, empty when examined. That laughter matters. Humor is one of the gentlest solvents of egoic seriousness. It loosens the costume without tearing it. It lets the actor remember the stage, and from there you begin to live a little differently, more locally, more honestly, more in conversation with what is actually here than with what fear predicts should be here. You begin to trust small things, one full breath before replying, one honest no, one unperformed yes, one task completed with your whole attention instead of 6 done under internal threat, one grief felt without commentary, one silence left unfilled. These are not minor gestures. They are openings through which an entire life begins to reorganize itself. The nervous system learns that it need not rehearse, collapse, to remain alert. The heart learns that it need not control love to receive it. The mind learns that not knowing is survivable, and often much closer to truth than its most polished explanations. You start to see why the search itself was exhausting, not because it was sinful or foolish, but because it kept demanding that life present itself in a form it never promised to take. It wanted certainty where only intimacy was available. It wanted permanence where only rhythm was honest. It wanted control where only participation could actually work. And once those mistaken demands lose authority, the whole theater begins to soften. This does not mean you become incapable of planning or discernment. Quite the opposite. Plans become cleaner because they are no longer bloated with metaphysical anxiety. Discernment becomes gentler because it no longer has to defend an imaginary controller. Action becomes clearer because it emerges from contact instead of panic. You may still get it wrong, of course. You will still clench sometimes. You will still go looking for guarantees in the night. You will still try to make freedom into a future object again. But now there is recognition, and recognition is extraordinarily powerful, because once illusion has been seen through, it can still appear, but it no longer feels like destiny. It feels like weather. It feels like an old reflex passing through a house with open windows. So perhaps the invitation now is very simple, not to become anything, not even to become freer, only to notice the next moment the search tightens into grasping and then soften 1 degree. Notice the jaw, bah. Notice the story. Notice the little manager racing to the front of the room. And instead of obeying immediately, breathe. Let the breath be the wave, and the wave the breath. Let the room stay a room. Let the mirror reflect without trying. Let the river river. Because the freedom you were promised was never waiting at the end of enough effort. It was always this strange, intimate, living openness in which effort rises and falls, in which seeking appears and disappears, in which even the one who thinks he has lost the way is already standing inside the field he longs to find. There is a point in this unfolding where the old seeker begins to look less tragic and more tender. You see how hard it has worked, how faithfully it has tried to earn what was never for sale. It kept building ladders toward the sky, not noticing the sky was what held the ladder. It kept polishing the mirror to make the face appear, not realizing the mirror's nature had never been in question. And so a gentleness enters that was not there before. Not indulgence, not sentimentality, just the relief of no longer treating your own inner life like a factory under inspection. You begin to notice how often the project of freedom made you more mechanical, not more alive. You were measuring the silence, scoring the breath, scheduling the soul, turning even stillness into labor. But stillness does not answer well to a stopwatch. Peace will not thrive in a room where it is being audited. It appears more like wild light than like a reward. It comes in sideways through a crack left open when striving grows tired. So now the question shifts again. Not how do I become free, but what is freedom like when no one is standing over it with a clipboard? At first the answer is startlingly ordinary. It is the way your shoulders feel after you stop holding an invisible roof. It is the breath finishing itself without needing your help. It is the small ease in the hand when you pick up a spoon or turn a key or close a laptop and do not turn the gesture into meaning. It is this, exactly this, the rediscovery that life is happening in gestures too small for ambition to admire. And because ambition rarely admires them, they remain hidden in plain sight, small doors in every hour. You can walk through one while washing fruit, while tying shoes, while hearing the neighbor's dog bark and not immediately converting the bark into commentary. Freedom is not hiding in the next insight if it cannot be found in the next breath. The mind does not enjoy hearing that. It prefers distant things, elevated things, difficult things. It likes mountains because mountains flatter the climber. But freedom behaves much more like floor than summit. It supports without announcement. It is what is already under you while you are searching for a place to stand. This is why the old project becomes exhausting. You were running across the floor looking for the floor. You were hunting for openness inside the very openness doing the hunting. No wonder the effort felt endless. It had no object large enough to satisfy it because the object was the subject, was the field, was the searching itself. Once this begins to sink in, the whole style of living changes. You stop asking ordinary moments to justify themselves by progress. Tea is no longer hydration plus mindfulness plus symbolic ritual plus recovery strategy plus evidence of a better you. It becomes tea. Rain is rain. Fatigue is fatigue. Desire is desire. Sorrow is sorrow. And this return of things to themselves is far from dull. In fact, it is what gives them their first real brightness, because things are no longer trapped beneath your use for them. The mind had turned nearly everything into scaffolding for self-construction. Even rest was for future performance. Even love was often for reassurance. Even grief got forced into meaning before it had finished becoming grief. Freedom begins to return when things are allowed to be what they are without immediate conscription into your private campaign. This is why so much softens when you stop insisting on a result from every experience. A walk can just be a walk. A conversation can just be contact. A sad afternoon can just be weather without becoming diagnosis. The body loves this simplicity because the body was never asking for philosophy first. It was asking for permission to exist without constant translation. Feel how much energy comes back when each sensation no longer has to report to headquarters. Warmth in the chest, fine. Tightness in the jaw, noted. Tears behind the eyes, welcome. No need for an essay, no need for a committee meeting. Just this honest weather moving through a sky vast enough to hold it. And when the sky is remembered, the old obsession with controlling weather starts to look almost innocent. Of course the mind wanted guarantees. It forgot it was sky and began thinking like a cloud. Of course it panicked at endings. It mistook shape for substance. Of course it tried to manufacture freedom through effort. It believed freedom was elsewhere. Be kind to that confusion. It has been expensive, yes. It has cost years, perhaps. It has cost tenderness, immediacy, laughter, rest. But contempt will not dissolve it. Seeing will, and seeing now has a softer hand. You recognize the old reflex at subtler levels. You catch it when you begin narrating a conversation before it has happened. You catch it when you start converting a creative act into a referendum on talent. You catch it when the body is tired and the mind tries to rename tiredness as failure. Each time you catch it, there is a chance to bow rather than obey. Not to annihilate the reflex, simply not to promote it. It may still speak. It need not run the room. This is where the deepest practicality of the whole matter appears. Freedom is not abstract once the search relaxes. It becomes a style of meeting. You meet the moment without preloading it with a demand that it save you. You meet another person without requiring them to stabilize your identity. You meet work without making every task a symbolic battle. You meet the body without treating it as a project in need of endless correction. You meet uncertainty without calling it injustice. And because you meet things more nearly as they are, response becomes easier to find. Not always easier to like, but easier to find. The next true move is usually simple. Drink the water. Make the call. Rest for 10 minutes. Say I don't know. Say no. Say yes. Open the curtains. Leave the phone in the other room. Let the tears come. Go for the walk. Close the door. None of these moves sound spiritual enough for the ambitious mind. That is precisely why they are powerful. They return you to the scale where life actually unfolds. There is no need to become a cosmic hero. A human being in right proportion is miracle enough. And right proportion feels less like greatness than like not adding what isn't needed. Not an extra thought, not an extra tightening, not an extra performance, not an extra argument with the weather. In that reduction, a great deal of suffering turns out to have been optional. Pain may remain, loss may remain, work may remain, change may remain, but the extra layer of internal prosecution begins to thin. You stop accusing the moment of not being different. You stop accusing yourself of not being done. You stop accusing life of being alive on its own terms. This is the beginning of real intimacy, not mystical in the distant sense. Intimate in the sense that your hand finally touches the table instead of the idea of the table. Your ears hear the kettle before the meaning of the kettle arrives. Your body sits in the chair instead of your mind sitting in tomorrow pretending it is now. Intimacy is always local. Fear is usually abstract. That is why intimacy disarms it. You cannot be quite so terrified by what is directly felt as you can by what is endlessly imagined. Direct experience has texture. Imagination in fear has only scale. It makes everything huge and everything vague. Contact makes things particular, and particularity is kind. A particular sorrow can be held, a general catastrophe cannot. A particular decision can be made, a general future cannot be solved. So the art becomes particularity. This cup, this shoulder, this room, this email, this rain, this silence, this simple next note in the music. Not forever, not all at once, just this. The seeker, hearing this, may still ask one last clever question. Very well, but if I stop seeking freedom, what is to stop me from drifting into laziness, confusion, or incoherence? The answer is almost hidden in the way the question is asked. It assumes that only fear can organize life, that only tension can produce coherence, that only striving can create rhythm. But look closely at anything beautiful done well. The dancer is not coherent because she is anxious. The musician is not rhythmic because he is afraid. The surfer is not responsive because she issued threats to the sea. Form emerges more beautifully where unnecessary strain leaves. This is not the end of discipline. It is the end of self-violence masquerading as discipline. The forms remain, but they are inhabited differently. You still return to practice, but as one returns to a beloved path rather than a punishment station. You still keep commitments, but not as chains forged in panic. You still refine your craft, but with affection for the material rather than hatred for the unfinished self. Everything important remains. What disappears is the theater of compulsion around it, and that disappearance is not a loss. It is a quiet abundance, more room, more air, more honesty, more music between the notes. This is why freedom cannot be found through seeking as the seeker usually seeks. Seeking presumes absence. Absence was the assumption. Relax the assumption, and what was longed for begins showing up in ordinary light, not because it arrived, but because you stopped insisting it was elsewhere. The wave did not become ocean, it remembered. The mirror did not learn to reflect, it cleared. The room did not turn sacred. It was already waiting without complaint for you to stop inspecting it and simply enter. So stay close to that now. The next time the old project manager rushes in with forms and forecasts and noble anxieties about your spiritual progress or lack of it, let him speak if he must. Offer him a chair, perhaps even a cup of tea, but do not hand him the keys. Let the music continue. Let the breath keep its own tide. Let the ordinary remain bright enough. Freedom was never asking to be captured, only noticed, and it is noticed best when the search for one unguarded moment forgets to continue. At some point, the whole structure becomes almost transparent, not because you have solved life, not because fear has been executed or the world has agreed to cooperate, but because you begin to see with painful simplicity that the seeker and the sought were never two separate things. You were hunting for the key while holding it as your own hand. You were standing in the room while begging for directions to the room. You were asking life to sign a promise while being lived by the very movement you were trying to secure. And once this is even dimly seen, a gentler intelligence begins to guide the days. The old project of becoming free no longer feels noble. It feels slightly overcomplicated, like building scaffolding around open sky. The mind may still produce its plans and forms and strategic concerns, but their authority thins. You begin to notice that so much of what called itself seeking was simply the refusal to stay close to what was already here, not out of wickedness, out of habit, out of inherited tension, out of the old misunderstanding that whatever is true must be far away, difficult, exalted, future-facing, worthy of heroic effort. Yet the truest things keep appearing in forms too simple for ambition to admire. The steam lifting from coffee, the small pause before replying, the weight of the body meeting the chair, the silence between two lines of speech, the way light falls on a sink in late afternoon as though the universe had a private way of reminding you that nearness is enough. So let us bring the teaching all the way down to the plain floorboards of life. Morning returns, as it always does, with its familiar tug. Plans, obligations, unresolved feelings, ambitions, errands, the subtle pressure to get ahead of the day before the day has even had a chance to introduce itself. Here is where the old reflex used to win so often. Reach, brace, measure, hurry, calculate, try to become equal to existence by getting there first. But now, perhaps something smaller and saner occurs. You notice the tug and breathe, not as a ritual to manufacture peace, but as a way of remembering the wider field in which the tug is happening. Coffee steams. The cup is warm. The room is not asking for heroics. One email waits. One true response may be enough. The ground is still willing to meet your feet halfway. This is what intimacy with life begins to look like when it has moved beyond philosophy. You still keep appointments, but the calendar no longer feels like a tyrant dictating whether you deserve to exist. You still make plans, but the plans are held more like dance partners than prison bars. You still feel pain, frustration, fatigue, uncertainty, even fear. None of that has to vanish for freedom to be real. The difference is in the atmosphere around them. You no longer insist that every weather pattern become a verdict. You no longer turn every rough wave into a prophecy about the whole sea. You begin responding to the local truth of things instead of rehearsing epic meanings around them. A bill arrives. You answer the bill, not your entire philosophy of scarcity. A difficult conversation arises. You answer the conversation, not the whole imagined court of judgment around it. Sadness enters the room. You allow sadness to be the weather, not the permanent architecture of identity. This is one of the quiet revolutions of genuine understanding. It returns scale to the moment. The next true move becomes visible because you are no longer drowning it in symbolic noise. And the next true move is very often modest. Drink the water. Take the walk. Finish the sentence. Say, I don't know. Say, I need a pause. Say yes. Say no. Rest before the body mutinies. Stop before the mind. Writes another manifesto about why stopping means failure. The sacredness of this is easy to miss because it wears no costume. It looks like ordinary adulthood performed with less panic and more listening. Yet that is exactly why it matters. Freedom was never going to appear as a glittering exception to ordinary life. It appears as a different way of inhabiting ordinary life. The way you tie your shoes, the way you wash a bowl, the way you speak to someone without using the conversation to rescue your image, the way you let silence remain silence instead of rushing to decorate it with performance, the way you stop asking every task to prove your worth and begin letting work be work. There is so much mercy in this, because once the seeker rests a little, you realize how often you were trying to complete the world through your actions. Every task was too heavy because it was carrying too much symbolic weight. Every disagreement was too dangerous because it seemed to threaten identity itself. Every uncertainty was too large because it was interpreted as a failure of cosmic management. But when that burden falls away, even slightly, life regains a more natural proportion. The small act becomes small again, and precisely for that reason it becomes possible to do it well. The same is true in love. You stop asking another person to be proof that you are safe forever. You let them be a person again, not a contract. You listen more, you explain less, you stop forcing emotional weather into fixed narratives. A good moment is allowed to be a good moment. A hard moment is allowed to be a hard moment. The relationship breathes because it is no longer being suffocated by the need to serve as final security. Curiously, this often makes love warmer, not colder, less theatrical, more trustworthy, because what enters the room now is presence, not strategy. Work changes under the same light. Ambition can remain, but it stops screaming. You can still care deeply, build seriously, revise, improve, negotiate, strive in the healthy sense, but the drive is no longer charged with the fantasy that one more achievement will finally authorize your existence. Competence becomes beautiful again, like a table well made, like script written cleanly, like the body moving with its task instead of against itself. Praise lands, criticism lands. Neither one needs to become your atmosphere. What steadies you more and more is belonging, not applause. And belonging here does not mean tribal agreement. It means this original intimacy with what is, this room, this breath, this body, this weather, this exact unrepeatable life. When fear visits, and it will, you notice sooner, not always immediately, but sooner. The jaw sets, the chest narrows, the old manager comes back with forms and forecasts. Good. You know him now. You do not have to exile him. You do not have to obey him either. Offer him a chair, perhaps even tea. Let him mutter about what if. Meanwhile, look at the window. Feel the floor. Answer one message, or answer none yet. Step outside. Listen to the ordinary sounds. Let the body remember it belongs to gravity more than it belongs to thought. Fear may still sit in the room, but it no longer runs the household. This is what the teaching was always pointing toward. Not invulnerability, not permanent calm, not a final state in which life ceases to be life, rather an ongoing posture, a way of returning again and again to what was never produced by striving in the first place, to warmth, weight, sound, breath, presence, intimacy, the open field in which all this appears. If you forget, good. Forgetting is part of remembering, just as exhale is part of inhale. You will still someday become convinced for 15 minutes or 2 hours or a week that you must control everything or be swallowed. Fine. Then, somewhere in the speech, you will hear the old tone and realize no judge ever entered the room. The gavel you feared was your own heartbeat. The crisis was real, perhaps, but the courtroom was optional. And in that recognition, the whole body may not relax at once, but something does. Enough for the next true thing to become visible. Enough for the curtain to move. Enough for life to stop feeling like something you are outside of trying to master. You are not outside it. That was the dream. You are in it, as it, moving with it, even when you forget, even when you clench, even when you cry, even when you laugh. The ocean does not cease to be ocean when one wave panics for a while. The mirror does not lose its nature because fog appears. The room does not disappear because the host got anxious. All that was ever needed was a little less noise, a little more looking, a little more willingness to let the ordinary reveal its hidden vastness. So let this be the ending that does not really end. Step gently into the next simple act and let it be enough. Answer the call, wash the cup, rest when tired, listen fully, speak plainly. Let the moment be local. Let life remain alive. Let freedom stop being a project and become the way things move when you stop demanding they stand still. And if you need one last line to keep near, let it be this. You were never meant to capture freedom. You were meant to notice that what you are, beneath all the managing and seeking and tightening, has always been the open space in which freedom quietly shines. There is a peculiar gentleness that arrives once all this stops being a theory and begins behaving like a life. You notice that freedom was never asking you to become extraordinary. It was asking you to stop interfering with the ordinary so aggressively. This changes the emotional climate of everything. You no longer treat the day as an exam you must pass to deserve rest. You no longer measure your inner life against some idealized schedule of constant clarity. You no longer assume that if fear revisits, all understanding has been lost. That old perfectionism was only the seeker wearing spiritual clothes. Real freedom does not demand that weather disappear. It only asks that weather stop pretending to be the whole sky. And so when tightening returns, because it will, you do not dramatize it into failure. You notice it. The jaw grows managerial. The breath starts signing contracts with tomorrow. The shoulders resume their ancient hobby of holding up an invisible roof. Fine. That is weather. You have seen weather before. The difference now is that you return sooner and with less violence. No self-scolding, no emergency reforms, no elaborate vows. Just return to the feet on the floor, to the cup in the hand, to the next honest sentence, to the room that was still here while you briefly wandered into argument. This is what makes freedom trustworthy. Not that it never gets lost, but that it keeps revealing itself as the ground to which you can return without ceremony. Return is one of the most underrated forms of grace. People think grace should look like a rival, like a permanent state, like a badge pinned to the chest of the awakened. But grace often looks like remembering in the middle of forgetting. It looks like catching yourself halfway into an old panic and stepping 1 inch to the side. It looks like realizing, in the 3rd paragraph of mental catastrophe, that no actual catastrophe has yet entered the room. It looks like seeing that the speech you were delivering to yourself was addressed to an audience that never bought a ticket. And in that small, clear seeing, the spell weakens. The problem did not vanish. The nervous system may still be stirred. The email may still need answering. The loss may still ache. But the extra theater begins to drain away. And as it drains away, life regains detail. Detail is what fear erases first. Fear works in grand summaries: always, never, everything, nothing, forever, ruined, safe, unsafe. Reality is much more textured than that. Reality is this spoon, this window, this unfinished conversation, this pulse, this little tremor in the gut, this evening light on the table, this one choice that can be made without needing to solve the next 20. To return to detail is to return to intimacy, and intimacy is what fear cannot tolerate for long, because intimacy keeps dissolving abstraction into contact. This is why freedom starts to feel less like an answer and more like a style of looking. Not a philosophy held above life, but a willingness to meet life before commentary colonizes it. The old self wanted to secure itself through understanding, to understand enough, to see enough, to stabilize enough, to never again be caught by the old confusion. But now a quieter wisdom enters. You do not need to trap truth in order to live from it. You do not need to hold the river still in order to drink. You do not need to pin the sky down to know it is there. And in fact, the very effort to finalize things is what keeps making them slippery. Freedom lives in movement. It is not the freezing of life into manageable certainty, but the capacity to move with life without making every turn into a private emergency. At this stage, the heart begins to trust itself differently, not as a heroic engine of enlightenment, but as an instrument that grows more accurate when it is not overhandled. You start to hear subtler notes. The slight falseness in a yes given too quickly, the clean ring of a no spoken without aggression, the quiet fatigue that means enough for today, the difference between rest and escape, the difference between care and control, the difference between urgency and importance. These are not abstract moral categories anymore. They become tones in the body, textures of attention, felt movements inside the day. A good musician does not think only in theory while playing. She feels tension, timing, grain, weight, resonance. In the same way, living becomes less about controlling concepts and more about tuning the instrument of attention. And tuned attention makes fear less persuasive, because the body begins to recognize dissonance sooner. You feel when thought has outrun reality. You feel when the story has become larger than the moment. You feel when the inner manager has slipped back into office and started drafting needless laws. This does not make you infallible. It makes you available. And availability is more useful than certainty ever was. Even kindness becomes transformed here. Before, kindness may have been mixed with performance, with the wish to be seen a certain way, with the hope that goodness would purchase safety or approval. Now, kindness begins to resemble something much simpler. a way of not adding unnecessary friction, a way of not turning local pain into cosmic accusation, a way of leaving room around another person and around yourself, a kindness that is practical enough to answer the email honestly, to pause before reacting, to let silence remain silence, to tell the truth with the least amount of violence. This kind of kindness is not sentimental, it is structural. It changes how the room feels, and because it changes how the room feels, it changes what becomes possible inside it. You may also begin to notice that the old hunger for spiritual climax loses some of its glamour. The mind once wanted transformation to be unmistakable, cinematic, publicly verifiable, even if only to itself. A mountaintop, a final answer, a private coronation. But what if the most faithful transformation is the loss of interest in that drama? What if the sign of real freedom is not that you finally feel special, but that you stop needing to? What if clarity behaves more like good light than like fireworks, letting everything be seen properly without asking to be admired? There is something deeply restful in that. The self no longer has to become a monument to prove it has learned. It can remain a weathered, useful, honest instrument through which life continues to sound. This makes ordinary days astonishingly rich, not because they contain more events, but because they contain less resistance. Coffee can be coffee, fatigue can be fatigue, a walk can be enough. A difficult conversation can remain difficult without becoming a referendum on your whole existence. The body can ache without being cast as traitor. The mind can become noisy without being treated as king. You begin to see that much of suffering's extra burden came from promotion, from taking every passing thing and promoting it to absolute significance. Freedom demotes. It returns weather to weather, thought to thought, sensation to sensation, task to task, grief to grief, love to love. And in that demotion, life gets brighter, not smaller. Because once everything stops pretending to be ultimate, the ultimate begins to shine through everything. Not loudly, quietly, in the hum of a room, in the taste of water, in the exactness of a tree's shadow, in the relief of one unclenched breath. So perhaps this is the maturation of the whole path. Not becoming someone who no longer experiences contraction, but someone who no longer takes contraction as final authority. Not someone who has transcended ordinary life, but someone who has fallen all the way into it and found it lit from within. Not someone who has captured freedom, but someone who has stopped demanding that freedom behave like property. This is why the search finally softens into gratitude. Gratitude not as a moral exercise, not as a list, not as another technique to improve mood, but as the natural fragrance of no longer being at war with what is already given. Breath is given, light is given, sound is given, the chance to answer one moment at a time is given. Even sorrow, when it arrives, brings its own dark teaching and asks only not to be turned into spectacle. Gratitude grows where management relaxes, because there is finally enough room to notice how much was never yours to manufacture. In such gratitude, fear cannot dominate for long. It may still speak. It cannot convincingly claim that you are abandoned in a dead machine. Too much life has already been noticed. Too much intimacy has returned. The room is too full of evidence. And then, one day, perhaps while doing something so small it almost escapes memory, putting a bowl away, closing a gate, buttoning a shirt, you may realize that the old hunger to become free has gone quiet, not because you won, not because you secured some metaphysical guarantee, but because the one who kept hunting has finally grown tired enough to rest in the seeing itself. And the seeing, being already open, already spacious, already undivided, does not need to become free. It simply is. There is no drama in that realization, only relief. Relief so simple it almost feels like humor. You stop searching for the house while standing in the doorway. You stop asking the mirror to produce a face it has never failed to reflect. You stop trying to instruct the river how to river. And all the while life continues, just as it always did, except now it is no longer being supervised by a frightened fiction pretending to be the source. The project manager has stepped outside. The music remains. The floor remains. The ordinary glows with a softness it had all along. If there is anything left to do, it is only this. Stay close. Close to breath, close to texture, close close to the next true move, close to the room as it is before fear subtitles it, close to the quiet recognition that freedom was never absent, only obscured by the labor of trying to earn what could only ever be noticed. And if you forget tomorrow, as you may, begin again there. Not with force, with closeness, not by searching harder, by looking more honestly, not by becoming someone else, but by relaxing enough to let what you already are shine through its own ordinary, unguarded light. And so it ends the way the truest things usually end, without trumpet, without certificate, without the dramatic flourish the mind had always secretly hoped would prove something final had happened. No mountain split open, no sky issued a diploma, no voice announced that from this day forward you would never again tighten, never again forget, never again wander into the old theater of control. Instead, the ending arrives like weather clearing from a window. A curtain lifts, the room remains the room, the dishes still wait, the body still carries its ordinary creaks and pulses, tomorrow still refuses to sign any contract, and yet something unmistakable has changed. You are no longer asking life to stand still long enough for you to feel safe. You are no longer trying to seize freedom with the same hand that made imprisonment. You are no longer standing outside the dance, clipboard in hand, lecturing the music about how it ought to behave. You have stepped in, or perhaps more honestly, you have stopped pretending you were ever outside. This is why the final revelation feels less like acquisition and more like recognition. It was never missing. It was never gone. It was only obscured by the labor of seeking. You kept asking how to become free while standing in the spaciousness that allowed the question to arise. You kept polishing one corner of the mirror, convinced that reflection depended on your effort, while the whole mirror had always been willing to show sky and face at once. You kept trying to outrun the river only to discover the river had been carrying you from the first step. Once this is seen, even dimly, the great ambition to finish yourself begins to look strangely unnecessary. Not because growth ends, not because life stops asking things of you, not because practice becomes irrelevant, but because the compulsive project of turning yourself into a future object worthy of peace begins to lose its glamour. The seeker relaxes. The sought remains. And what remains turns out to be exactly what was here before the project started. This breath, this room, this sensation of weight and warmth and sound, this open awareness in which even confusion appears and disappears. The old mind still asks its favorite question now and then, will this last? You smile because you no longer require the answer it once demanded. Lasting was never the point. The point was intimacy. The point was seeing that what you are is not improved by being made permanent, because it was never the temporary shape alone. The wave may pass, certainly. The costume may be folded away. The particular weather of this body, this mood, this chapter, this face will change. Of course, but what you are in the deepest sense is not exhausted by any single appearance. The ocean does not vanish because one wave collapses. The mirror does not die when one reflection leaves, and so the fear of endings begins to lose its old authority. Endings still matter. They still ache. They still ask something tender of the heart, but they are no longer treated as proof that life has failed you. They become cadence, they become modulation, they become weather passing through a sky spacious enough to let weather happen. This has practical consequences, which is the real test of any understanding. Morning comes and you do not immediately convert the day into an exam. You make coffee and let coffee be coffee. You answer an email and let it be one note in the music, not a referendum on your worth. You walk out into air and let the air meet you without needing it to mean anything more than itself. The body still gets tired, and now tired is not interpreted as moral collapse. It is tired. It asks for rest. The heart still breaks. And now heartbreak is not treated as a sign that love was a mistake. It is the cost of having let something matter. Plans still fail, and now failed plans need not become failed identity. They are simply the river changing course around a stone. This is the new proportion. Nothing has been flattened. Everything has been returned to its right size. And because everything is no longer inflated into cosmic significance, the ordinary begins to shine, a spoon against a bowl, the exact color of late light on a wall, the way silence settles after an honest sentence, the relief of not forcing meaning where contact is enough. Even your mistakes begin to change character. They still happen, but they no longer need to become proof that you are behind. They become feedback, weather, information, another note folded into the wider song. You apologize where apology is true. You learn what can be learned. Then the day keeps moving. This is what freedom looks like when it stops being mythology and becomes posture. It does not remove consequence. It removes unnecessary drama. It does not abolish fear forever. It restores fear to weather. It does not make you special. It makes you available. Available to the next true move. Available to the actual person in front of you. Available to the room before the commentary colonizes it. Available to the breath before it is drafted into a campaign. Available to the possibility that life, left less interrupted, may know how to move better than your panic ever did. There is also a kind of sweetness here, one the old seeker would have distrusted because it cannot be turned into status. You become easier company, even for yourself, not because you have perfected the personality, but because you are no longer demanding so much from each moment. A cup can be a cup, a conversation can be a conversation. A quiet evening can remain quiet without being used to prove spiritual progress. You no longer stand over the soul like a nervous supervisor. You become more like a host, bread on the table, window open, a place for grief, if grief arrives, a place for laughter if it comes unannounced, a chair near the window if fear wishes to visit, not exiled, not enthroned, simply included without being obeyed. This is why the end of the search often feels less like triumph than like homecoming. Nothing spectacular, just the relief of no longer standing in your own doorway, asking to be let in. You were never outside. The whole project was built on that misunderstanding. And the misunderstanding, once seen, does not need to be killed. It just needs to stop being believed every time it speaks. The old project manager may still appear, papers in hand, wanting one more meeting about how best to secure the future. Let him sit if he must. He has been working hard, but the meeting does not have to resume. Outside, the guests are already dancing in the rain. The music continues whether he approves or not. That image matters because it says something central. Freedom is not a sealed state that replaces life. It is life when the compulsive overseer steps aside. The dance was always underway. The rain was always falling. The floor was always under your feet. The sky was never withholding itself. Only the posture of grasping made it seem otherwise. So if there is any final invitation here, it is disarmingly small. Let the next breath finish. Let the next ordinary act be enough. Let the next moment reveal itself before you subtitle it. When tightening appears, notice, breathe, soften, respond. Repeat not as a program of self-improvement, but as a rhythm of return. In time, the rhythm becomes trust. In time, trust becomes a way of walking. In time, the whole day begins to feel less like something to conquer and more like something to join. You still plan, you still care, you still act, but your actions come less from emergency and more from intimacy. That intimacy is the heart of the matter. Safety was never a guarantee from tomorrow. It was always the closeness of meeting what is now without demanding it become something else first. And because that closeness can always be rediscovered in any room, under any weather, after any forgetting, the old hunger to secure life relaxes. You become willing to let the world be alive on its own terms and to belong to it as you are. Not finished, not perfected, not immune, just present, just listening. Just participating in the great ordinary music without insisting on being its frightened conductor. Then the deepest paradox becomes almost funny in its simplicity. You never became free. You stopped trying to imprison yourself through seeking. You never captured peace. You stopped hiding from the peace already woven into this breath, this body, this room, this exact unfinished life. The wave bows back into the ocean. The mirror clears. The room waits, patient as ever, And you, at last, stop searching long enough to notice that the house was always yours, the door was never locked, and the freedom you wanted was simply the open space in which everything had been appearing all along.
It is a curious thing, this tendency we all share, the urge to hold on to people, to hold on to ideas, to hold on to the stories we tell about who we are and what the world is. We clutch at memories of the past, as though replaying them might somehow make them last forever. We grip tightly at visions of the future, as if our grasp could bend time to obey our plans. And yet, in all this holding, we discover a strange weight. Instead of safety, it gives us a kind of suffocation. Instead of comfort, it makes us anxious, always fearing the moment when our grip might slip. Why do we hold on so desperately? It is because we have been taught that to let go is to lose. If I let go of this relationship, I will be abandoned. If I let go of this belief, I will be adrift. If I let go of control, everything will fall apart. And so, with clenched fists, we drag the baggage of yesterday into today and try to pack tomorrow into the same suitcase until we are exhausted under the sheer weight of it. But life, you see, is not meant to be carried like this. Life is a river, not a stone. It moves, it flows, it shifts. And when we try to grasp the current, we only end up with water slipping through our fingers. The tighter we hold, the more we realize we cannot truly hold at all. Consider for a moment the simple act of breathing. You breathe in, and then you must breathe out. If you try to only inhale, clinging to the air as though to lose it would mean to lose your life, you will suffocate. The very act of living requires release. It requires the rhythm of in and out, of taking and giving, of holding and letting go. And yet, when it comes to our attachments, we try to live as though we can only inhale, never exhale. The result is the same suffocation, but this time in our minds and our hearts. Look also at nature's trees. Each autumn, they shed their leaves, releasing what no longer serves them. They do not argue with the season. They do not cling to what has had its time. And because they let go, they are renewed. Spring comes and new leaves burst forth. Imagine if the tree resisted. Imagine if it gripped every leaf in panic, crying, "I cannot let this one go. It is mine. It defines me." What would happen? The tree would rot, unable to grow, unable to flourish. It is only in release that life finds its rhythm. But we, unlike the tree, tell ourselves stories. We imagine that if we let go, we will fall into emptiness. We imagine we are separate little beings standing against the tide of existence, and that if we do not hold on, the tide will wash us away. And so we resist, and we resist until the struggle becomes unbearable. Think of how we hold on to relationships that have already ended in spirit, afraid of the silence that might follow. We hold on to old identities. I am this kind of person. I cannot change. I must always live this way, even when the skin has grown too tight, like clothes from childhood that no longer fit. We hold on to resentments, to grievances, to past mistakes, dragging them behind us like heavy stones, all the while wondering why we feel so tired. But the truth is, letting go is not the opposite of love, nor the opposite of care. To let go is not to reject. It is to recognize the natural movement of things, just as waves rise and fall, just as days begin and end, just as lives appear and dissolve. So too does every form, every moment, follow the rhythm of arising and passing. To resist this rhythm is to resist life itself. It is like trying to stop a river with your hands. You may feel, for a brief instant, that you are succeeding, but soon the current pushes past, stronger than your grip, indifferent to your effort. And then you are left exhausted, while the river flows on. But why do we resist so fiercely? Because we mistake holding for control. We believe that if we grip tightly enough, we can preserve what we love, secure what we fear to lose, or shape the future to our design. And yet, have you noticed? The things we cling to most fiercely are often the very ones that slip away. Think of the lover smothered by another's insecurity, who leaves not because of lack of love, but because they cannot breathe under the grip. Think of the person so obsessed with controlling every detail of their life that they leave no room for surprise, no room for spontaneity, and so they find themselves trapped in the very order they desired. Think of the one who cannot release the memory of a wound, and so carries it, reliving the pain again and again, as though it were happening now. In all of this, the fear of letting go is the fear of death in miniature. For to let go is to allow something to end, to allow a moment to pass, a form to dissolve, a self to change. And because we fear the great death, the dissolution of our own body, our own ego, we fear all the little deaths along the way. We imagine that by holding on, we can resist the great tide, keep ourselves intact, but in truth, it is the clinging that breaks us. You may notice this in the smallest of things. Try to hold water in a tight fist, and it escapes. Hold it gently, with an open palm, and it rests with you for a while. Try to clutch at love, and it suffocates. Let it breathe, and it grows. Try to force your life into rigid certainty, and it rebels. Allow it to flow, and it carries you further than you could have planned. So the problem is not that life takes things away. The problem is that we refuse to see that life is always taking and giving, always flowing, always changing. To demand permanence in a world of movement is to fight against the very essence of what is. The suffering of holding on is not only in the loss itself, but in the constant tension, the vigilance, the anxiety of guarding what cannot be guarded. Like a man clutching a rope that is fraying in his hands, we exhaust ourselves trying to prevent the inevitable. And in doing so, we miss the beauty of what is still here, still alive, still present. And so, you may notice, fear grows not from reality itself, but from the stories we weave. If I let this go, I will be nothing. If I release control, life will collapse. These are shadows of thought, not truths. For in fact, you are already letting go in every moment. You let go of each breath, or you would die. You let go of each moment, or time would freeze. You let go of sleep each morning, or the day could never begin. Letting go is already the rhythm of your being. You cannot resist it forever. You can only blind yourself to it. The great paradox is that by clinging, you do not preserve life, you smother it. By resisting change, you do not secure safety, you create fear. By holding on, you do not keep things as they are, you hasten their decay. And so, we must see clearly, the fear of letting go is born from an illusion, the illusion that we are separate from the flow, that life is something happening to us rather than as us. But once you see that you are the river itself, the need to clutch at each drop begins to fade. The beginning of wisdom is to see the cost of holding on, to see that it is not safety, but weight, not love, but suffocation, not freedom, but prison. Only when this is seen can the heart begin to loosen its grip. And so, as you sit here listening, perhaps you can feel in your own life what it is you are clutching. Perhaps a person, perhaps a story, perhaps an image of yourself. Feel the tension of it, the way it weighs upon you. Notice that it is not the thing itself that weighs you down, but the clinging. And see, if only for a moment, that there may be another way. If holding on binds us in tension, then letting go is the beginning of freedom. Yet, many hear this and immediately recoil. If I let go, won't I lose everything? Won't life spin into chaos? Won't I fall into nothingness? But you see, this is the illusion. For letting go does not mean falling into emptiness, it means falling into life. It means aligning yourself with the rhythm that has been carrying you all along. Think again of breathing. You let go of the breath not to die, but to live. The release makes room for the next inhalation, the next renewal. Imagine if you refuse to exhale, clinging desperately to the air as though your survival depended upon it. You would suffocate. The irony is clear. You live because you let go, again and again. This rhythm of release is everywhere. The trees let go of their leaves so that new growth may appear. The snake sheds its skin, or else it cannot expand. The earth itself shifts, quakes, moves, so that new mountains may rise, new valleys may form. To let go is not a failure of life, but its very condition. Now, notice what happens in you when you release. Perhaps you have experienced it already. You cling to some resentment, some injury from the past. You replay it, you nurse it, you rehearse the words you should have said, and then, one day, perhaps out of exhaustion, you let it go. And what do you feel? Relief, lightness. The world, unchanged in its outer form, suddenly appears brighter. The sky seems wider, the air easier to breathe. Nothing has changed but the grip of your hand, and in that small gesture, everything is transformed. So letting go is not loss, but transformation. It is not the end of love, but the beginning of freedom within love. For when you hold someone too tightly, you do not love them, you possess them. And possession strangles. To love is to let another be, to allow them the freedom of their own movement, their own becoming. And when you grant this, you discover something extraordinary, that love does not vanish when released. It grows, it deepens, it breathes. Letting go of control is much the same. You may imagine that unless you manage every detail, life will collapse into disorder. But in truth, life is already happening without your command. Your heart beats without your orders, your cells divide, your blood flows, your breath moves, the earth spins, the stars burn, all without your intervention. Control is a story, a game we play with ourselves. Life does not wait for your instructions. So what happens when you release this compulsion to control? At first, fear, because the ego imagines it is the master, and to surrender is to die. But beneath that fear is a discovery that life carries you more gracefully than you could ever carry yourself. Like a swimmer who finally stops thrashing and allows the water to hold them, you realize you are buoyant. You do not sink into chaos. You float into harmony. Now, letting go does not mean apathy. It does not mean turning your back on life or abandoning care. It means participating without clinging, engaging without grasping. It is like dancing with a partner. If you clutch at them, the dance is stiff and awkward. If you collapse and refuse to move, the dance cannot happen at all. But if you allow, give and take, guiding and yielding, the dance becomes alive, spontaneous, free. So it is with life. You are not to be a puppet, dragged helplessly, nor are you to be a tyrant, forcing every step. You are to be a dancer, moving with the rhythm, listening, responding, trusting. This is what the Chinese call wu wei, not forcing, not straining, but moving with the grain of the universe. Now, one of the greatest fears in letting go is the fear of death. We cling to life, imagining that if we grip hard enough, we can stave off the inevitable. But death is not the enemy. Death is the great letting go, and without it, life would not be. Just as sleep is necessary to renew the body, so death renews the cycle of existence. The leaf falls, but the tree lives on. The wave dissolves, but the ocean remains. And so, when you let go in small ways of a thought, of a grievance, of a fear, You are practicing the art of dying. You are rehearsing the great surrender that will one day come to us all. And in practicing it, you discover that death is not destruction, but renewal. What falls away makes room for what is to come. Even time itself teaches this. You cannot cling to a single moment. Try as you may to preserve it, the moment passes. The laughter fades, the embrace ends, the sunset gives way to night. And yet, this is not a tragedy, for the very passing makes room for what is next. If the day did not end, the night could not begin. If the note did not fade, the song could not continue. Life is not in the holding of one instant, but in the continuous flow from one to another. So, letting go is not abandonment. It is participation in the rhythm of existence. It is to see that you are not separate from the flow, standing against it, but the flow itself. You are not the hand clutching at the river. You are the river. And once this is seen, the fear begins to loosen. Now, notice in your own life where this might be so. Perhaps there is a person you cannot release, even though the time has passed. Perhaps there is a version of yourself you cling to, though it no longer fits. Perhaps there is a fear you rehearse endlessly, as if preparing for it could prevent it. And see, just for a moment, what it would feel like to open your hand, not to push it away, not to destroy it, but simply to release. Feel the lightness in that image, the freedom. This is the invitation of letting go. And here is the curious thing. When you let go, what is real does not vanish. Love remains, but it is free. The self remains, but it is flexible. Life remains, but it is lighter. What vanishes is the tension, the anxiety, the weight of clutching at shadows. You lose nothing but your chains. So the practice of letting go is not about throwing life away, but about finally receiving it. For as long as your hands are clenched, they cannot receive. Only the open hand can be filled. Only the relaxed heart can feel joy. Only the surrendered mind can discover peace. This is why the sages and mystics, again and again, spoke of surrender, not as defeat, but as liberation, not as loss, but as gain. To surrender is to see that you were never in control to begin with, and that this is not bad news, but the best news possible. For it means you are carried, sustained, supported by something far greater than the little I you believed yourself to be. So when you are afraid of letting go, remember this: you have been letting go all along. Each breath, each moment, each night's sleep, you have already practiced surrender countless times, and each time, life has continued. The fear is a story, not a reality. And when you release even a little, you discover the great secret. Life holds you. The ocean does not drop its waves. The sky does not abandon its clouds. The earth does not reject its children. You belong always. And letting go is the way you remember it. So let yourself soften. Let yourself breathe. Let the clenched fist open. The guarded heart relax. The worried mind fall silent. You will not fall into nothingness. You will fall into everything. For letting go is not the end. It is the beginning of freedom. Everyone, at some point, has felt the sting of being hurt. Someone you trusted betrayed you. Someone you loved abandoned you. Someone you depended on dismissed you as if you were nothing. And in those moments, the pain feels unbearable. It feels like your very being has been wounded, as though something precious inside you has been torn apart. We walk through life carrying these wounds like badges, telling ourselves, I will never let this happen again. And so we build walls. We armor ourselves with indifference. We wear masks of confidence, pretending we cannot be touched. But have you noticed? The more armor you put on, the heavier it becomes. The more you try to protect yourself, the more fragile you actually feel. because deep down you know the wall is not real protection. It is only a prison. Think about a piece of glass. If you want to keep it safe, you might wrap it in cloth, hide it away in a box, and lock the box in a room. But then what happens? The glass never sees the light. It never fulfills its purpose. And the moment it touches the world again, the smallest blow will shatter it. This is what happens to us when we live in armor. We cut ourselves off from life, thinking it will spare us from pain. But instead, it makes us brittle. Have you noticed that the strongest things in nature are not hard, but soft? A tree that does not bend with the wind is uprooted. A rock crumbles, but water flows on. The soft, the yielding, the flexible, these endure. So ask yourself, why do you want to be hard? Why do you want to be untouchable? Hardness looks like strength, but it is actually weakness in disguise. Here is the paradox. You are hurt not because of what happens to you, but because of the meaning you give it. If someone insults you, the words themselves are just sounds. But if you believe those words, if they strike against the image you carry of yourself, then you feel pain. If someone rejects you, what hurts is not their absence, but the story you tell yourself that you are unworthy, unlovable, less than whole. The event itself is neutral. It is the interpretation that cuts. This is difficult to see because we are trained to live through images of ourselves. We think we are this fragile mask that must be defended at all costs. And when the mask is scratched, we cry out as though the face itself has been wounded. But who you really are cannot be scratched. When you look closely, you realize that the hurt is never in the insult, never in the betrayal, never in the rejection. The hurt is in the clutching, the holding on, the refusal to let the wave pass. Pain is a wave. It rises, it crashes, it disappears. But suffering is what happens when you hold the wave, when you try to stop it from dissolving. You say, this should not have happened. And in that clinging, the wound deepens. We imagine that if only life were different, if only people treated us better, if only the world were kinder, then we would never be hurt again. But that is not the way of things. The world is full of storms. People will betray you, people will reject you, people will misunderstand you. That is the nature of the play. The real question is not whether storms will come, but whether you will insist on being a house of glass in the middle of the hurricane, or whether you will discover that you are the air itself through which the storm moves, but which is never broken. This is why every attempt to make yourself untouchable through force, through hardness, through withdrawal, eventually fails, because the problem was never the storm. The problem was your identification with the house. You are not the fragile structure being battered by the wind. You are the space in which the wind blows. And if you see this, you realize something extraordinary. You cannot actually be hurt. Now, perhaps you think, that can't be true. I have felt pain, I have suffered, I have scars. Yes, of course, pain comes, like the rain, but rain cannot drown the sky. Storms cannot scar the space through which they pass. Your awareness, your true being, is untouched by events. Only the image of yourself, the little mask you cling to, feels wounded. Imagine a mirror. People can stand in front of it, they can smile, they can frown, they can curse at it, they can praise it, but the mirror itself is unaffected. It does not become more beautiful when someone smiles into it, nor does it become ugly when someone spits at it. The reflections come and go. The mirror remains. So it is with you. The insults, the betrayals, the losses, these are reflections, temporary, passing. But you, as awareness itself, are untouched. The tragedy is that we spend our lives trying to fix the reflections, not realizing we are the mirror. We polish the mask, defend it, hide it, parade it, and we suffer endlessly because masks can be damaged, images can be torn, but the awareness behind them cannot. You have never been wounded at your core. You have only believed in wounds. And when you begin to see this, something shifts. You realize that the hurt you carry is a story about what should or should not have happened, and stories can be released. This is why the old masters say, drop the burden, drop the mask, let go of the story. You think you are protecting yourself with armor, but the armor is what makes you heavy. You think you are preserving your dignity by holding on to the wound, but the wound is what keeps you from being free. Letting go does not mean pretending it didn't happen. It means seeing that it does not define you. It means realizing that what you are is deeper than any event, any insult, any betrayal. The ocean does not fear the storm. It allows it, embraces it, swallows it whole. And when the storm is gone, the ocean remains vast, deep, untouched. You are that ocean. So if you have been hurt, and surely you have, remember this: the pain is not a proof of your weakness, but an invitation to see where you are clinging. And if you dare to look deeper, you may find that beneath the wound, beneath the story, beneath the mask, there is something that has never been touched at all. That is who you are. And from that place, you will see that no one and nothing can truly hurt you. There comes a moment when you begin to see that what you thought was strength was actually fear. The armor you wore was not a sign of courage, but of trembling. The mask you carried was not self-expression, but self-protection. And when you glimpse this, you may feel naked, exposed, as though you have stripped away the only thing keeping you safe. But here is the secret. What you stripped away was not safety at all. It was the very weight that kept you drowning. We believe that by closing ourselves off, we will avoid hurt. But notice what happens when you close your heart. Yes, you may avoid rejection, but you also avoid intimacy. Yes, you may avoid betrayal, but you also avoid trust. Yes, you may avoid loss, but you also avoid love. And so, in trying to escape pain, you also escape joy. In avoiding hurt, you avoid life itself. Is this not a strange bargain? To trade the vastness of living for the narrow safety of a cage? But here is the paradox. When you open yourself fully, when you stop resisting the storms, you discover that nothing can truly touch you. Not because you have hardened, but because you have discovered the part of you that was never fragile to begin with. This is what the mystics call the ground of being, the Tao, the Atman, the self beyond the self. It is not something you achieve. It is not something you build. It is what you already are, and it is untouchable. Think of water. It can be struck, cut, divided, beaten, and yet it yields. It flows around obstacles. It takes the shape of any container, and when the container is gone, it returns to its own form. You cannot hurt water. You can only change its shape for a moment. Or think of the sky. Planes may cut through it. Clouds may thunder. Storms may rage, but the sky itself is never harmed. It does not carry scars. It does not remember insults. It is open, boundless, unmarked. This is what you are, not the passing events, not the insults, not the betrayals, not the fleeting stories. You are the awareness in which all of this arises, the open sky in which the storms of life play for a little while. But we forget this. And in forgetting, we suffer. We think, they hurt me, they betrayed me, they broke me. But who is this me that was broken? Is it not simply a story, an image? Your real being cannot be betrayed because it is not dependent on others. It cannot be broken because it has no parts. It cannot be abandoned because it is the very ground on which all relationships play. The one who is hurt is the mask, but the mask is not you. And here comes the great reversal. When you stop clinging to the mask, when you stop believing you are the fragile self-image, the very possibility of being hurt dissolves. This does not mean you become cold or indifferent. On the contrary, you become more alive, more open, more tender. Because now you are no longer afraid. You can love without fear of loss, because you see that loss cannot touch your essence. You can trust without fear of betrayal, because betrayal cannot wound your being. You can live without fear of death, because death cannot end what you truly are. Imagine this, a mirror. A child may stand in front of it, laughing, making silly faces. Later, an angry man may stand in front of it, shouting, spitting, cursing, but the mirror remains untouched. It reflects, it allows, but it is never stained. You are that mirror. The events of your life are reflections. They come, they go, they pass, but you as awareness itself remain unstained. To live from this realization is to become untouchable, not because nothing ever happens, but because nothing leaves a scar. The waves come, the waves go, the ocean remains, and this is the ultimate freedom. Because once you see that no one can truly hurt you, you stop living in fear. And when fear dissolves, love arises naturally. You no longer close yourself off. You no longer carry the heavy armor. You no longer resist the storms. Instead, you allow them, you dance with them, you even laugh at them. This is what it means to be free. Not the absence of pain, but the absence of resistance. Not the promise that storms will never come, but the discovery that storms cannot harm the sky. Now, let us return to where we began. You have been hurt. Of course you have. Every human being has. But what if those hurts were not what you thought they were? What if they were invitations? Invitations to see more deeply into yourself? The betrayal that shattered your heart, perhaps it was showing you that your heart cannot truly be shattered. The insult that burned in your mind, perhaps it was revealing that the one you thought you were is only a mask. The loss that left you in grief, perhaps it was pointing you to the part of you that cannot be lost. Seen this way, every hurt becomes a doorway. Every wound becomes a teacher. Every scar becomes a reminder, not of fragility, but of the indestructible being that you are. And so, the question is not, how do I protect myself from hurt? The question is, who is it that I think is being hurt? Look there. Look closely. You will find that the one you thought was so vulnerable, so fragile, so easily broken, is only a shadow, a story, a passing reflection. The real you, the awareness in which all of this arises, is untouchable. And if you truly see this, then the great burden lifts, the armor falls away, the mask dissolves, and you walk through life light, open, free. Yes, storms will come, people will betray, insult, misunderstand, reject. But these are only clouds passing through the vastness of your sky, and the sky remains. So the next time you feel hurt, remember, the hurt is a story, the pain is a wave. Let it come, let it go. And in the quiet after the storm, you will notice you were never truly touched. You were never truly broken. You were never truly harmed. You have always been the open sky, the vast ocean, the mirror that cannot be stained. And in this realization, you will find a freedom beyond anything you ever imagined, because no one and nothing can truly hurt you. There are times, you know, when life just stops making any noise inside you. You wake up, you go through the motions, you speak, you smile when necessary, but underneath it all there's this great silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind, the kind that feels like the absence of everything that once made you human. And you wonder, perhaps in the middle of the night, what happened? Not what went wrong, but what simply went away. Now this, you see, is something very few people talk about honestly, because it's not quite sadness, and it's not depression in the way we describe it. It's this strange neutral state where the heart has gone quiet. It's as though life has been drained of its taste, its color, its temperature. Food doesn't move you, music doesn't move you, beauty passes by, and you say, yes, that's nice, but it doesn't reach you. And the mind? Oh, the mind tries very hard to fix it. It says you're tired, or you need purpose, or you must be missing something. And so we set out again on another little quest. We read another book, we buy another thing, we start another project, and for a few moments, we feel that flicker, that little flame of being alive, and then, almost cruelly, it disappears again. Now, perhaps you've noticed that when you feel nothing at all, the temptation is to run toward something, anything that will make you feel again. And yet, the more you run, the quieter it gets inside. You start to realize that what you're trying to escape is not outside of you. It's this very absence itself. You're afraid of it. You're afraid of nothingness. Let me tell you about a man I once met after a lecture. He waited until everyone had left, and then came up to me with that sort of half smile people wear when they're holding back tears. He said, "Alan, I don't feel anything anymore. Not joy, not sorrow. It's like my life has gone flat, and I'm terrified that I've broken something inside myself." And I said, well, perhaps you've broken the illusion that something inside you needs to always be feeling. You see, we have this idea that feeling is proof of being alive, that to feel nothing is to be half dead. But that's not true. Sometimes to feel nothing is to stand at the very edge of transformation, because feeling nothing is what happens when the old ways of responding no longer make sense, when the machinery of your personality, all the habits, all the emotional reflexes have finally worn out. And so, for a while, you're left in this strange twilight. You're not who you were, but you haven't yet discovered who you are. And in that interval, it feels like a kind of death. The Buddhists have a word for this, shunyata, emptiness. Not emptiness as in despair, but emptiness as in spaciousness, as in a room cleared out so that something new might enter. But we in the West, we've never been very good at letting rooms stay empty. We rush to fill them with noise, with company, with goals. We can't bear the echo, and yet it's precisely that echo that begins to teach us something. Because when you finally stop running from it, you start to hear something softer within the silence. You start to notice that this nothing is not hostile. It's not an enemy. It's a space. And in that space, you are still there. You haven't vanished. You're simply resting from the performance of being someone. Now, if you've ever truly felt this kind of emptiness, you know it can't be solved by self-improvement. You can meditate, journal, change your diet, change your surroundings, and yet the silence remains. That's because the silence is not a problem. It's a teacher. Think of it like the winter of the soul. In winter, the trees look dead, the ground is cold, lifeless. But what's really happening is not death, it's incubation. Life is gathering itself unseen beneath the surface, waiting for the right season to emerge again. But if you were to judge the tree in winter, you'd say, it's over, it's finished. And that's what we do to ourselves when we feel nothing. We think something's gone wrong, but what's really happening is that the part of us that used to be moved by certain things no longer needs to be. That version of us has outlived its time. And so we call it numbness, but perhaps it's simply ripening. Now, of course, when I say this, people sometimes protest. They say, but Alan, if I don't feel, how can I love? How can I care? How can I live meaningfully? And I say, my dear, what if love itself is larger than feeling? What if caring doesn't always come with passion, but sometimes with quiet presence? What if meaning is what remains when you stop demanding life to feel a certain way? You see, we've confused feeling with aliveness, And in doing so, we've made aliveness terribly fragile. We think that to be alive means to be excited, inspired, passionate, moved, but that's just one flavor of it. There's another kind still. Vast. Clear the aliveness of simply being aware. When you begin to realize this, the fear starts to ease. You no longer demand that every moment sparkle. You stop accusing yourself of being broken because you're not laughing or crying or thrilled. You start to see that there is peace in neutrality. There's a strange beauty in not needing life to perform for you. And in that moment, the numbness becomes softer. It begins to open like a shell. You start to feel not emotion, but presence. The texture of air, the sound of your own breathing, the subtle rhythm of existence. You see, when you stop searching for fireworks, you start noticing the candlelight. Now, the man I mentioned earlier, the one who said he felt nothing, he wrote to me a few months later. He said, "I still feel nothing extraordinary, but it doesn't frighten me anymore. I go on my walks, I watch the sky, and sometimes I feel something small, something quiet. Not joy, exactly, more like belonging. And that, I think, is the beginning of awakening, because the heart doesn't reopen through force, it reopens through gentleness. When you stop demanding to feel alive, life returns to you in the most unassuming ways. It's rather like the way a wild animal returns to the forest after a storm. It waits until everything is still. If you go thrashing about shouting, come back, it will hide deeper. But if you sit quietly, not needing it, not forcing it, eventually it appears again, curious, cautious, alive. And so it is with the human spirit. When you stop chasing feeling, feeling finds you. You see, most of our suffering comes from thinking we've lost something that was never ours to begin with. We say, I've lost my spark, or I've lost my joy, as though joy were an object you could misplace. But you never had it. It was never a possession. It was a rhythm and you were dancing to it. When the music changes, the body pauses. But the pause is not the end of the dance. It's part of it. The silence you fear is part of life's rhythm. The space between notes makes the music possible. Now, perhaps, if you're in that space right now, the worst thing anyone can tell you is cheer up or find your passion again, because they don't understand that what's happening isn't a problem to solve, it's an unfolding to witness. So instead of asking, how do I feel again? Ask, can I stay here long enough to see what this silence has to show me? Because if you can, you will start to notice that even in the emptiness, something subtle moves, awareness itself. And that, my dear, is life quietly breathing through you, even when you feel nothing at all. You see, we've been taught to think of awareness as a servant of feeling, as though being aware is only useful when it's filled with excitement or meaning. But awareness doesn't need a reason, it simply is. It's the background upon which all feelings appear and disappear. And when the feelings are gone, the awareness remains, quietly watching. So when you say, I feel nothing, what's actually happening is this. Awareness is still there, but it's no longer occupied. It's no longer being fed by the usual dramas and desires. It's as though the theater of your life has gone dark, the actors have gone home, and you're sitting in the empty hall, listening to the quiet. And at first, it feels lonely, intolerably so. But if you stay, if you resist the urge to switch the lights back on, something extraordinary begins to happen. You realize that the silence is alive. That's the strange thing. The silence, which seems so empty, starts to hum with a kind of invisible fullness. You notice the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a dog, the feeling of your own pulse in your hands. You start to sense the world breathing around you. And you think, well, nothing's happening, but in that nothing, everything is. This is what the mystics have been trying to tell us for centuries. That nothingness is not the absence of life. It's the presence of all life before we name it. It's the womb of experience. It's where the next form of you is forming. But the trouble is, most people never stay long enough to see it. They feel the first chill of emptiness and run back to the fire of distraction. They turn on a screen, call a friend, make plans, anything to drown the echo, because silence to the ego feels like death. And in a sense it is. The death of the ego's constant need to be entertained, to be validated, to be in control. But that's the death that makes space for something much wider, something that doesn't come and go with moods or circumstances. Now, perhaps you've noticed this paradox. When you finally stop trying to feel something, the world starts to feel you. The sunset, which you used to chase for beauty, now simply happens, and it touches you without effort. The sound of rain doesn't inspire emotion, it is emotion without the label. Even boredom becomes strangely peaceful. This is the beginning of what I would call true feeling, not the noisy kind that rises and falls like waves, but the still kind that underlies the sea, the feeling of existence itself. But it's not easy to recognize this, because our culture has told us since birth that value comes from intensity. We admire passion, energy, enthusiasm. We say, he's so full of life. But we forget that even the stars burn themselves out. And what remains afterward is not death, it's vast, quiet space. So if you are in that quiet now, if you've grown tired of striving and still find no joy, I say, good, you're on the right track. Because you are beginning to see through the illusion that feeling something is better than seeing clearly. There is a peculiar story I remember from a student of mine, a woman who had spent years chasing inspiration. She told me, Alan, I used to paint every day, and it filled me with meaning. But now I stand before the canvas and feel nothing. I've lost my gift. And I said, maybe you've lost the gift of ambition, not the gift of seeing. Try to paint without meaning. A few weeks later, she sent me a small painting, a simple one. A white bowl on a wooden table, sunlight touching the rim. There was no message, no drama, but it was alive in a way her earlier work wasn't. You could feel the quiet. She wrote, I think I understand now. I don't paint to express anymore. I paint to listen. And that's it, you see. That's the movement from striving to seeing, from expression to presence. The world becomes not something you decorate with meaning, but something you participate in wordlessly. Now, the interesting thing is that when you stop trying to feel and you start allowing the nothingness, emotion returns on its own. It's softer, humbler. It's no longer a performance. It's like when the snow melts, the earth doesn't have to try to be fertile. It just is. The same happens in the human heart. When the ice of exhaustion melts, feeling flows again. Not the dramatic kind that sweeps you away, but the kind that roots you in being. But to reach that point, you must be willing to sit in the winter, to let the numbness teach you what false feelings have been carrying you all this time. And that's the secret most people never discover, that numbness is not the absence of emotion, but the exhaustion of pretending. You've spent years being what the world asked you to be, excited, loving, productive, optimistic, spiritual even. Each of those roles drains the battery of the soul, and when the performance ends, the silence that follows is the sound of truth returning. But because no one tells you this, you think something's wrong. You say, why can't I go back? But you can't go back to pretending because you've seen too much. The numbness is not punishment, it's protection. It's your spirit saying, enough, let's just be. And when you surrender to that, when you stop demanding fireworks, something gentler appears. You start noticing the smallest movements, the sound of a kettle, the warmth of light on your hand. These tiny things, once ignored, now shimmer with a quiet importance. It's as though the universe is whispering, I'm still here. You see, feeling doesn't begin when the heart races. It begins when you stop racing. The most profound feelings often appear in disguise, not as joy, but as stillness, not as excitement, but as peace. And then one day, quite suddenly, you will find yourself crying over nothing at all, the way the leaves move, the way a stranger laughs, the way sunlight hits a wall. And you'll realize that the nothing you feared was never empty. It was holding everything you were too busy to feel. So if you are here now, walking through this strange landscape of quiet, don't rush to leave it. Don't mistake it for apathy or failure. You are not broken. You are becoming real. The world you once knew was built on noise. And silence, at first, feels like loss, but it's only clearing the ground for truth. Every seed feels buried before it grows. So let the numbness be your soil. Let it cover you, hold you, and trust that what looks like emptiness is just the space life needs to begin again. Because one day, you will wake up and realize that nothing has changed and yet everything feels alive again. The same sky, the same faces, the same world, but you are seeing it from beyond the veil of meaning. You are no longer trying to extract feeling from life, you are letting life feel through you. And that, you see, is the difference between being alive and knowing you are alive. When you've sat in the stillness long enough, something begins to move again. Not the mind that's been running all along, but something deeper. Something that stirs beneath the surface like the first ripple on a frozen pond. It doesn't come as fireworks or revelation. It comes as warmth. A faint warmth that feels almost fragile at first, like the light of dawn before the sun rises. You can't quite explain it. Nothing in your life has changed. You're still the same person, sitting in the same chair, looking at the same world. But something in the way you see has shifted. The silence that once frightened you now feels intimate. The emptiness that once felt hollow now feels safe, as though you're resting in the hands of something vast. And then it hits you, this is what you were running from all along. Not the pain, not the sadness, but the simplicity of being. Because to simply be is to give up control. It's to stop managing your own aliveness and let it unfold on its own terms. It's a humbling thing to realize that life doesn't need your constant supervision, that the heart beats without your permission, that breath moves in and out without your will. And when you stop interfering, you see that the world has always known how to take care of itself. We imagine ourselves as the authors of our experience, but really, we are the readers. The story is already written in the language of time and change, and our only task is to read it aloud with wonder. The reason most people can't feel is not because they're empty, but because they're trying to write faster than they can read. They're trying to force meaning into a moment that hasn't yet revealed itself. But meaning is not a thing you make, it's something you notice when you stop trying to manufacture it. You may recall a time in your life when you laughed so hard you forgot yourself, or looked at the ocean and felt both small and infinite. That's the moment you stopped thinking about life and started being with it. That's the return we're all aching for, the home we keep leaving without knowing. And you begin to see that even your numbness was part of that homecoming. It stripped you of everything that wasn't real, your ambitions, your self-image, even your spirituality, until only awareness remained. That's why people mistake awakening for emptiness at first. Because awakening isn't adding light to the darkness, it's realizing the darkness was light all along, misunderstood. You can't awaken from something that isn't dreaming. And the dream, you see, is this endless pursuit of how you think you're supposed to feel. But when you wake, even slightly, you see that every state, joy, sorrow, confusion, numbness, was never a mistake. It was all life exploring itself through different textures. You are not supposed to always feel vibrant. You are supposed to feel alive, which includes the quiet, the empty, the lost, and the tender. Now, the remarkable thing is that when this understanding starts to sink in, love appears. Not the romantic kind, not even the emotional kind, but the kind that feels like gravity. A quiet recognition that everything belongs. The mistakes, the silences, the parts of you tried to fix, all of it was already part of the dance. You start forgiving yourself without effort. Because you see, there's nothing left to forgive. The one who made the mistakes no longer exists. That version of you was doing its best with the light it had. And this love, this quiet, unconditional recognition begins to color everything. You see the world not as a set of problems to solve, but as a constant movement of form and disappearance. And you realize nothing ever truly leaves. Things change, yes, but disappearance is only transformation by another name. This is when feeling returns, but it doesn't arrive as drama, it arrives as grace. The way water returns to the earth, not with thunder, but with rain. You find yourself feeling moved by small things, again, a bird pausing on the window, the sound of someone laughing nearby, the weight of your own breath. You don't chase these moments. They appear naturally, like reflections in still water. And then you understand feeling was never gone. You were simply looking for it in the wrong direction. You were looking outward toward the world of sensations and meanings, when all along it was waiting inward in the stillness that never left. When you stop running from nothingness, you find it's the only place peace has ever lived. And that peace is not an experience, but a condition of being the natural state beneath the noise. It doesn't depend on mood, achievement, or clarity. It's the quiet recognition that everything you touch is temporary, and that this is not a tragedy, but the very reason life can be beautiful. Because if everything stayed, nothing would move, and if nothing moved, there could be no experience at all. So feeling nothing, for a time, is life teaching you how to stop confusing movement with meaning. It's the pause between the notes that lets the music breathe. You begin to live differently when you know this. You stop grasping at pleasure and stop running from pain. You begin to trust the seasons of your own spirit. When joy comes, you welcome it, but when silence returns, you don't fight it, you make tea for it. And when you look back, you see that what you called numbness was really a teacher in disguise. It came to strip away what was false, so that what was true could finally be felt. I remember once a man asked me, "Alan, how do I find peace?" And I said, "Stop looking for it as something to find. Start seeing it as what remains when the search ends." The man said, "Then should I do nothing?" And I smiled. Doing nothing is still doing something. The trick is to stop trying to do nothing and allow yourself to be what is already happening. This puzzled him, as it does most of us. But later he wrote to me saying, "I sat by the river for hours, and nothing happened until I realized that the river was doing all the happening." That's it. When you stop trying to force life, you realize life has been living you all along. The numbness fades not because you escape it, but because you stop naming it. When you stop calling it emptiness, it becomes space. When you stop calling it loneliness, it becomes presence. When you stop calling it meaninglessness, it becomes freedom. And then one day you notice you're smiling again, not for any reason, but because the breeze feels like a friend. Because the moment, however small, feels like home. The return of feeling is quiet, humble, and profoundly ordinary. It doesn't arrive with music or revelation. It arrives as a soft knowing that you were never separate from the flow. That everything, even your detachment, was part of life's way of holding you until you were ready to soften again. So, if you feel nothing now, do not despair. You are standing at the threshold of your own awakening. You are learning how to feel without the drama, to love without the story, to live without the noise. And the beauty of it all is that life doesn't rush you. It waits, endlessly patient, until you are ready to remember. Because the truth is, life was never trying to make you feel something. It was trying to show you that you are what's feeling itself. Not a person having an emotion, but awareness meeting its own reflection. And once you see that, once you truly understand that the silence inside you is not a void but a mirror, you realize you've never been alone. You've only been looking away. When you sit quietly, you begin to sense that there is a pulse beneath everything, a rhythm so subtle that only stillness can hear it. And that pulse is the universe breathing through you. You realize you don't need to find connection because you are connection. You don't need to chase purpose because purpose is simply the act of being awake to this. Feeling nothing was never a problem to solve. It was a doorway through which you step, leaving behind the noise of identity and entering the space where being and feeling are one and the same. And when you walk through that door, life no longer happens to you. It happens as you. The rain falls, and you are the rain. The wind moves, and you are the wind. The world breathes, and you are the breath. You are the silence listening to itself. So, if you are feeling nothing at all, know this: you are closer to truth than you've ever been. Stay there, let it open, and soon enough, you will see that nothing was ever missing. You were simply being prepared to see the everything that was always here. Because in the stillest moment, when all else fades away, you'll finally understand nothing was wrong, nothing was broken, nothing was missing. It was all just life unfolding quietly until you were ready to feel again.
Just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. Yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. Have you ever noticed that suffering is not so much in the pain itself, but in the way we cling to it, resist it, and try to escape from it? It's curious, isn't it? The moment you resist a thing, you magnify it. The moment you push against a thought, you give it strength. And so much of what we call suffering isn't in the rain that falls upon us, but in the way we curse the storm. Now, I'm not suggesting that life is free of difficulty. Far from it. Life has always been a dance of opposites. Pain and pleasure, gain and loss, birth and death, they are as inseparable as the front and the back of a coin. But here is the trick. You see, suffering is not the same as pain. Pain is simply what is. The sting of loss, the ache of the body, the tears of parting, these are natural as the tides. But suffering is the story we weave around it. It is the why me. It is the clinging, the holding on, the desperate attempt to control what was never in our control. There is an old saying in Zen, let go or be dragged. And this is precisely the matter at hand. When you stop clutching, when you let the river flow, you find that the water carries you. But when you stiffen, when you insist on paddling against the current, you exhaust yourself. And then, of course, you call that exhaustion suffering. Now imagine this for a moment. Suppose you are sitting in a concert hall, listening to the most marvelous symphony. The violins rise, the horns call, the drums thunder, and then there are those soft silences between notes. If you tried to cling to one particular note, one particular moment, you would miss the music entirely. And yet that is what so many of us do with life. We clutch to the past, we resist the present, and we demand that the future turn out just so. And in this struggle, we suffer. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. Isn't that delightful? You stir up the pond, and then you panic, wondering why you cannot see. But if you would only stop meddling, if you would let the water settle on its own, it becomes clear again. This is the essence of ending suffering. To stop trying to force clarity, to stop grasping for control, to let life be. And yet, here comes the paradox. The very moment you try to let go, you will find yourself grasping at letting go. You will say, I must stop suffering, I must drop it, I must let it go. And suddenly, suffering is right back in the room, laughing at you. So, what do? You don't do. You notice, you watch, you become aware of this game you are playing, and in that very awareness, a kind of miracle happens. The grasping begins to loosen on its own. This is why I often say, man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. Life is a game, a play, a cosmic hide and seek. You are it, pretending not to be it. You are the universe playing at being a person. And the moment you recognize that this whole drama isn't meant to be taken with such deadly seriousness, you begin to laugh at your suffering. And what happens when you laugh? You loosen, you breathe, you live. Think of a child. A child falls, scrapes its knee, and within moments they are up again laughing, running. The pain is there, yes, but it has not yet solidified into suffering. Why? Because the child has not learned to weave long stories about it. They haven't yet learned to cling. But we as adults become very good at storytelling. We carry our wounds like treasures, retelling them, protecting them, building identities around them. And in this endless narration, we suffer far more than the original wound ever required. So let me tell you a story. One you may have heard before, but it bears repeating. There was once a Chinese farmer. One day, his horse ran away, and the neighbors came and said, "Oh, that's too bad." And the farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day, the horse returned, bringing with it 7 wild horses, and the neighbors came again and said, "Why, how wonderful!" And the farmer said, "Maybe." The day after, his son tried to ride one of the wild horses, and he was thrown off, breaking his leg. The neighbors rushed in, "Oh, that's terrible." And again the farmer said, "Maybe." The very next day, conscription officers came, looking for young men to draft into the army. But because the son had a broken leg, they passed him by. And the neighbors cried, "How fortunate!" And the farmer, as always, replied, "Maybe." Now, the point of this story is not about being clever or detached. It's about seeing that life is endlessly unfolding, and our judgments of good and bad, fortunate and unfortunate, are terribly short-sighted. When you see this, you begin to loosen your grip on things. You stop suffering over each twist of the plot, because you realize you are not meant to judge the story, you are meant to experience it. Man is a little bit afraid. He wonders what will happen next. But that is precisely the adventure. The attempt to escape suffering is often the very root of it. You fear the unknown, you fear loss, you fear death. But all of these are part of the adventure. The trick, you see, is not to get rid of the storm, but to learn to dance in the rain, not to abolish the silence, but to hear the music within it, not to conquer death, but to realize that death is what makes life so exquisitely alive. And so, if you wish to stop suffering now, don't begin with the attempt to rearrange life. Begin with the way you see it. Look at the river, look at the sky, look at your own thoughts, rising and falling like clouds, and see they were never under your control anyway. When you allow them to flow, you discover a strange thing. Suffering evaporates, and in its place there is a kind of deep, wordless peace. It is not the peace of having solved everything, but the peace of no longer needing to. The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless. Suffering comes from our desperate attempt to make the impermanent permanent. We want the joy without the loss, the life without the death, the gain without the risk. But this is to want a one-sided coin, and a one-sided coin does not exist. When you see this, when you truly see it, you stop fighting the rhythm of life, and in that moment suffering dissolves. So perhaps the invitation is not to escape suffering, but to see through it, to recognize it as a trick of the mind, a tightening where loosening is possible. And in this recognition, right here, right now, you are free. So we have this feeling of being a lonely little me, inside a bag of skin, looking out at a world that is foreign and often threatening. We feel that we came into this world. But did you? Or did you come out of it? Like an apple comes out of an apple tree. Have you noticed this peculiar illusion we carry? The sense that we are strangers in the universe, accidental visitors, isolated egos inside these fragile shells of flesh. We imagine ourselves tossed into a world that does not belong to us, that is indifferent or hostile. And because of this illusion, we feel lonely. We feel afraid. We feel the weight of being a separate self, adrift in a vast, uncaring cosmos. But pause for a moment. Ask yourself honestly, did you really come into this world? Or did you come out of it? Just as a leaf comes out of a branch, just as the wave rises out of the sea, the universe has been unfolding for billions of years. And here you are, a blossoming, an expression, a ripple in its eternal dance. You are not a visitor. You are the happening itself. Consider the wave. A wave curls upon the ocean surface. It rises, takes form, gathers strength, and if it could think, it might say, "Look at me. I am a wave. I am important, separate, special." But the wave also fears. It sees its own end approaching as it tumbles toward the shore. It trembles at the crash, thinking it will vanish forever, and so it suffers. But what the wave forgets, what we forget, is that it is never separate from the ocean. Its water is the ocean's water. Its motion is the ocean's motion. The crash upon the shore is not the end of the wave, but a transformation. It returns to the sea, just as it always was the sea. You are that wave. You may call yourself by a name, John or Jane, but your true identity is oceanic. You are the universe itself, playing at being a temporary ripple. And when you see this, fear dissolves. Loneliness fades, because you realize you cannot fall out of the ocean. You cannot be lost. You are the ocean, forever folding into new forms. Now let's deepen this. The universe is not merely ocean, but a great play of opposites. Light and dark, sound and silence, life and death. We live in a system of polarity. The crest of the wave cannot exist without the trough. The heartbeat itself, systole and diastole, contraction and expansion. If the heart stopped alternating, you would not be alive. Yet what do? We try to cling to one side and reject the other. We worship the light but curse the darkness. We chase pleasure but resist pain. We want to live but we fear death. And here is the trick. You cannot have one without the other. It's like trying to play a game of chess with only white pieces, or trying to listen to music with only sound and no silence. The opposites define one another. Without the background of night, the stars would not shine. Without silence, music would be meaningless. Without death, life would lose its urgency, its beauty. But suffering arises when we forget this is a game, when we treat one side as an enemy to be conquered, rather than a partner in the dance. The yin-yang symbol, you see, is not static. It's always turning, always flowing. The black contains the seed of white, and the white contains the seed of black. They chase one another like lovers, like dancers. The universe is not at war with itself. It is in love with itself. It is playing, it is dancing. And you are one of its graceful movements. Now let's take another metaphor. Imagine life as a grand theater. The curtain rises, the actors step onto the stage, and the play begins. To be a good actor, you must believe in your role. If you are playing the tragic hero, you must weep real tears. If you are playing the clown, you must laugh with all your heart. But the great actor never forgets. This is a role. The tears are real, yet they are also play. When the curtain falls, the actor steps off stage, removes the costume, and goes home. Now here is the human predicament. We have forgotten we are actors. We are stuck on the stage, utterly convinced the play is reality itself. We take our role as John or Mary with such seriousness, such gravity, that we suffer as if the play were eternal. But what happens when you remember, when you see that the role is temporary, that the curtain will fall? You do not stop acting. In fact, you act even better, because you can give yourself fully to the role, knowing it is not the whole of you. You are not just the actor, you are the audience, watching the play unfold. You are the playwright, weaving the story. You are the stage itself, upon which the drama appears. And when you realize this, the tragedy loses its sting. The comedy sparkles. And even the sorrows of life become part of the magnificent performance. But perhaps the deepest illusion of all is the sense of separation. This feeling of being a lonely little me, trapped in a bag of skin, peering out at a world that is other. Science will tell you quite correctly that your body is made of stardust, that the iron in your blood was forged in the heart of stars that exploded billions of years ago, that the breath you inhale right now was exhaled by trees, and the breath you exhale is food for them. You are not separate from the environment. You are the environment. You don't live in the universe. You are the universe, living as this particular form for a little while. The illusion of being separate is the root of fear, and thus the root of suffering. Because if you believe you are only this fragile ego, you must constantly defend it, protect it, cling to it, and of course it feels terrifying to lose it. But when you see through the illusion, when you realize you are the ocean, the waves, the actor, the stage, the whole cosmic drama, then death itself loses its teeth. Because how can the universe lose itself? It is only changing costume. only shifting masks, only moving from one dance to another. Let me share with you one final image. The Hindus say the universe is a game of hide and seek. God, or Brahman, hides from himself by becoming us, by becoming the world of forms, by pretending to be you and forgetting. Why? Because there is no fun in playing a game where you already know the ending. So the self hides from itself, takes on the disguise of you, and pretends to be lost. And the whole adventure of life is the thrill of seeking. But sooner or later, the game reaches its turning point. The mask slips, the curtain is lifted, and you remember, it was me all along. I was the seeker and the sought, the hider and the finder, the player and the game. And then you laugh, because you realize suffering was never more than forgetting the playful nature of it all. You are the aperture through which the universe is looking at itself and exploring itself. And when you know this, not as an idea, but as a lived reality, life transforms. The fear of death loosens. The grip of loneliness fades. The seriousness of suffering dissolves. Because you remember, you are not merely in the cosmos. You are the cosmos. And this whole drama, with its joys and sorrows, is your play. So how does one stop suffering now? The ego's first instinct is to find a method, a technique, a new thing to do. To try even harder to control the game. But that is like a person trapped in quicksand, struggling. It only sinks them deeper. The way is not to grasp, but to let go. We human beings are funny creatures. When faced with the challenge of suffering, our first thought is always, what should I do? We want a prescription, a technique, a map. We want some clever method that will finally fix it all. But do you see the trick here? The very one who is suffering, the grasping, anxious self, is the one trying to end suffering. It's like a dog chasing its own tail, or like a man in quicksand who thrashes and flails, only to sink deeper with every effort. The harder you try to be free, the more tightly you bind yourself. Because the very act of trying is rooted in resistance, and resistance is the seed of suffering. This is why control never quite works. You say to yourself, I must let go, I must relax, I must trust, and already you are clutching at relaxation, grasping at trust, forcing yourself to let go. It's absurd, isn't it? And yet, this is the human predicament. We try to control the uncontrollable. We try to clutch the river with our hands. And then we wonder why we come up empty. Letting go is not something you do. It is what happens when you see that there is nothing to hold on to. It's like opening your hand and realizing it was empty all along. It is that we are constantly labeling events as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, based on a tiny sliver of perspective. But the truth is, we do not know. We cannot know. The story is still unfolding. Our endless judgments, our compulsive labeling, they are the very roots of anxiety. We live in constant tension, afraid of what may come, desperate to hold on to what we call good, terrified of what we call bad. But if we could live like the farmer, with that soft smile of maybe, suffering would dissolve like morning mist. So then, what is the alternative? If not control, if not judgment, what is left? Attention. Pure, unfiltered, childlike attention. Instead of trying to change what is, try simply to look at it. Feel the anxiety in your chest. Don't call it bad. Don't try to fix it. Just feel it as it is. Listen to the sound of the rain on the roof. Don't call it pleasant. Don't call it unpleasant. Just listen. Look at the light filtering through the trees. Don't say, how beautiful. Don't say, how ordinary. Just look. And when you do this, something miraculous happens. The world, which had grown flat and gray, suddenly becomes alive again. Everything shimmers with mystery, as if seen for the first time. You become like a child, and for a child, everything is gee whiz. The most ordinary pebble is a jewel. The most common insect is a dragon. The whole world is vibrant, alive, radiant. Now, I must warn you to live this way feels like living without a net, because the ego desperately wants guarantees. It wants security, certainty, a safety rope to cling to. But life offers no such thing, and that, my friends, is its beauty. The tree does not ask for a guarantee of spring. It simply blossoms. The bird does not demand a contract with the sky. It simply spreads its wings and flies. Living without a net is to realize you don't actually have to let go, because there is nothing to hold on to. There never was. You see, all along, you have been like a man clutching at empty air, imagining it was a rope. And when you finally look, you laugh because there is nothing to release. You are already free. This is the wisdom of unknowing. We are so desperate to know, to pin down, to fix, to explain. But what if we could rest in the vastness of not knowing? What if we could meet each moment without the burden of labels, without the need for certainty? Then life would not be a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The river flows, and you flow with it. The wind blows, and you bend with it. The stars burn, and you burn with them. There is no plan to follow, no secret key to find. There is only this moment, this breath, this dance. And when you see this, you discover a peace deeper than answers. The peace of not needing to know. The peace of simply being. And here comes the final joke of it all. The very thing you have been searching for, freedom, peace, the end of suffering, was never hiding. It was here all along. It's like looking for your own head. You can twist and turn, peer into every mirror, ask every teacher, but you will never see it directly, because it is what you are looking from. In the same way, you are the very freedom you seek. You are the very peace you long for. You are it. Always, already here. And the moment you stop searching, the moment you stop touching, you see it like a joke that was waiting all along. And then perhaps you laugh. The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real deep down you is the whole universe. And when you realize this, that there is no rope to grasp, no net to fall into, no separate self to protect, you stop struggling, you stop suffering, and you live. Not tomorrow, not when you figured it all out, but now, always now. So here we are, my friends, at the final turn of this little journey together. We began with a knot, the knot of suffering, the sense that you are a lonely little creature, cast adrift in a vast and hostile universe. And perhaps along the way you've noticed that knot beginning to loosen. Not by force, not by pulling at it, but simply by seeing it for what it is, an illusion. You see, all along, the suffering was not in life itself, but in the way we held on to it. The way we tried to freeze the dance into a still photograph. The way we insisted on being the permanent guest in an impermanent party. And life, of course, refuses. Life moves, it dances, it breathes. And so our suffering was the friction between our demand for solidity and the universe's endless fluidity. Now, let us tie the threads together. We began with separation, a skin-encapsulated ego, looking out through the eyes as if through tiny windows, fearing the world outside. We discovered that this little self, this lonely I, is no more than a mask, a role in a play. And behind the mask, why, behind the mask is the entire theater, the stage, the lights, the script, the orchestra, the audience. All of it is you playing hide and seek with itself. And what a marvelous trick it is to hide from yourself so thoroughly that you can forget your true nature, only to rediscover it with a rush of laughter and tears. For what is enlightenment but a cosmic game of peekaboo? You hid, and now you see. And so, let me remind you of something very important. Life is not a journey with some grand prize at the end. It is a symphony. You don't play the symphony to get to the end of it. No one listens to Beethoven's Ninth and says, "Oh, I can't wait for the final note." That would be absurd. No, you listen for the play of notes, the rise and fall, the silence between the sounds. Life is precisely like that. It is a song. And you are invited to sing along, not to rush to the final chord. The meaning, you see, is not waiting at the finish line. The meaning is now, in the laughing child, in the sound of rain against the window, in the pulse of your own breath. The tragedy of human suffering is that we forget the music and try to turn it into a race. We strain to arrive, all the while missing the very thing we came for, the dancing of the notes. And this is why, you see, the masters, the sages, the poets, they laugh. They laugh not because they mock life, but because they finally got the joke. They realized that there was nothing to get. Now, think for a moment of a dancer. A dancer does not dance to arrive at a particular spot on the floor. If they did, the quickest way would be to walk directly there. No, the dancer dances because the movement itself is the delight. So too with the universe. It does not spin galaxies into being because it needs them to arrive somewhere. It spins because spinning is its joy. You are not here to accomplish some divine checklist. You are here because the cosmos could not resist the artistry of making a you. You are its pirouette, its laughter, its brushstroke of color. But remember this, the dance always includes its opposite. The spin requires the stillness. The music requires the silence. The wave requires the trough. So don't imagine that to live in harmony means to avoid sorrow, or to escape death, or to outrun the shadow. To live is to embrace the shadow as the partner of the light, to hold both hands in the dance. Suffering only arises when we insist on clinging to one hand and rejecting the other. Think once more of the wave. The wave rises, curls, and crashes, and all the while it trembles, saying, I must not end. I must hold myself together. But the truth is, the wave never ends. Its water was the ocean all along. When it falls, it simply returns to itself. And you, dear listener, are precisely the same. You are not something apart from this grand ocean of being. You are the ocean waving. And when you fall, you do not end, you return. So breathe. And in that breath, realize it is not you breathing. It is the cosmos breathing through you. And so, perhaps you wonder, what am I to do now? And the marvelous answer is, nothing in particular. Or rather, everything. There is no prescribed action, no secret key, no final step. The great relief of awakening is that life no longer needs to be conquered. You don't need to force it into meaning. It is meaning already. Just as a flower does not bloom with an agenda, you do not need one either. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a mystery to be lived. Try this. Tomorrow morning, as you step outside, don't name anything you see. Don't call it tree, don't call it bird, don't call it sky. Just look, just listen. Let the universe wash over you, without the filter of labels. You will find it is alive, shimmering miraculous, because you have stopped trying to make it fit into the tight little boxes of thought. So let me invite you now, the next time anxiety rises, see if you can notice it not as an enemy, but as a ripple in the dance. The next time sorrow comes, see if you can cradle it gently, like a violin note in the symphony. And the next time joy visits, welcome it, but don't cling to it. Let it pass too, for everything is part of the rhythm. Remember, you are not merely listening to the music, you are the music. Let us end, then, with this. You are a function of what the whole universe is doing. In the same way, a wave is a function of what the whole ocean is doing. You are not a puppet dangling on strings, nor a stranger lost in a foreign land. You are the land, the strings, the puppeteer, the play, the laughter, the tears. So when you suffer, remember, it is the universe stretching itself into form, into contrast, into dance. And when you let go, you realize that you were never separate at all. So go now, not with heavy commandments, but with curiosity. Look out the window. See the sky, the leaves, the people passing by. Hear the hum of life around you. Don't name it, don't judge it, just let it sing to you. For in the end, there is no end. Only the eternal music, the endless dance of energy. And in that knowing, suffering dissolves. Right here, right now.